Hey, can I ask a question? I have been holding through this pain and I just wanna act so I can gain some direction. It's hard for me to keep my mind above on things in heaven when I'm so stuck on earth and filled with all of this depression. Stuck up in my mental section. Oh, to feel some affection. Oh, to hear a good message. Oh, I've been so restless, feeling like my soul is tested. Super hot, I'm cold stepping in this hot furnace that's telling me that there's no blessing. This is what I wanna ask, how you still going strong? Well, to be honest, fam, I just been holding on, cause life done hit me like hurricanes when they blowing strong. Blessings ain't something my mental state tends to focus on, but making y'all so happy I feel the spirit in my funny bone. I was a busy bee grinding to bring some honey home, but what you finna do when you come back and all the honey gone? Leave y'all, keep them closer than the friendly zone. Yes, I've been through some pressures, in and out of worldly pleasures, going through the hardest times, just teach us how to hold together. There's a time for everything, you just gotta know the weather. Everybody has a falling, everybody's spring is better. Everybody has to sow and everybody has to reap. I'm out here planting good seeds so my family can feast. And everything I do and every trauma that I face, I keep the word in mind and help me keep the doubt away. I do this for the poor, I do this for the folk who feeling so unheard. They really think they have to shout to pray, cause help is sitting miles away and going through the foulest days. Not something that I'm proud to say, because there shouldn't be a person with no house to stay or child who couldn't chow away. It makes me make this vow to stay. This keeps me motivated. They tell me I'm going places, straight out of the dark into the heart of all the coldest places, just to show them love so all the ice can leave and melt away. Keep holding on, I promise that there's better days. Tomorrow's more than yesterday, when there's folk who ain't never ate a minute since 3 days ago, or maybe 5 or maybe 8. I promise you don't have to be afraid, cause y'all gon' keep you safe. I'm sorry for the people who don't understand, who show you hate because lately you going under, man. But one day they gon' come again, asking questions, wondering how y'all could make a king out of someone who ain't have something there. No limits, your God sits higher than these skies, just put your hope in it. That can make a whole difference, literally a whole difference. Big enough for you to plant a seed and watch it grow in it. Tears can be the rain you used to pour in it. Dirt they put on you can be the dirt you used to sow it in. I know you hold that seed tight, so just keep holding on. I've been down a long time, now I'm getting up. Y'all show me the vision, so I'm never giving up. Almost went to hell, but now my mind on heaven up. I've been in it for a minute, you ain't finna mess it up. Y'all told me keep his promise in my heart, I said okay. I know you been going through a 30-30 place, but your cup is running over, I got something on the way. In the passion by the still waters, you know where I lay. Hey, haters kicking at me, might get messy, yo and Tony. My heart was the goal, but they ain't know y'all was the goalie. No scoring, you shoot a shot at me, my yacht get soaring. In spite of jet, Vietnam bomb type of roaring. I just gotta pray he show you mercy. I've been praying hard, I hope he heard me. Hold up, I thought you was trying to hurt me. So why you in here crying where the church be? Oh, it's gonna be okay. Happy that you on the winning side where you was safe. I ain't finna cat no time for beef because your life is stake. Should've told you about the Lord when you was hating my mistake. Lately I was feeling slow, bro. Past flashing slow-mo. Please play no more, thinking I had no hope. Try to kick it with my bros, remember I had no bros. When I dropped that life I had a steady feeling no goals. Y'all told me keep going, you get it too close. Y'all, I don't know if I can keep going. Keep your head up, heaven waiting on the streets golden. Oh y'all, please never help me to lose. I won't focus like a panorama camera where I'm going. Y'all, this world is getting cold, I might be standing where I'm going. They been trying to make me mad, I guess Bruce Banner where I'm going. I'm still dancing through my problems like Atlanta where I'm going. Moving up, new levels, bigger team, new devils. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. Moving up, new levels, bigger team, new devils. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. God told me to keep his promise, I said, oh, okay. I know you've been going through a dirty, dirty place, but your cup is running over, I got something on the way. In the pasture by the still waters, you know where I lay. Hey, had 100 problems, walked them out like I'm a centipede. You say I ain't real, alright, just repent and leave. I'ma walk your testimony, that's the thing gon' get in me. Come back with some sense, I'll let you know what he done did to me. God is good and God is great, I'm coming for my best and play. Them haters only feeding me, I bless the food and then I ate. They say life's a piece of crap, I said this a piece of cake. I've been carrying them burdens, y'all told me to lead the way. ALPHAANDO and MEGA. He the Alpha and Omega, he the truth and like the way. Leave my Asalama, I'm about to make you give him praise. If he rollin' by my side, then we be rollin' all the way. Moving up, new levels, bigger team, new devils. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. Moving up, new levels, bigger team, new devils. I said I'll do anything to see an angel. I said I'll do anything to see an angel.
Mamleket Kohanim, Kingdom of Priests, Culture, and Heritage Preservation, to preserve, support, and promote the culture, history, and heritage of African every people scattered worldwide throughout the diaspora. Objective is to raise awareness and support to assist those who descend from the ancient African every groups, scattered throughout the globe with their desire to learn more about their history. The organization's efforts will be to connect with others of this heritage, scattered through the world through education, research, networking, media, and charitable efforts. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 through 6, King James Version. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and there shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, Mamleket, Kohanim, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 through 10, NISB 95. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Here are our customs. We turn towards Jerusalem when praying. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 38 through 39 says, If they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, where they have been taken captive, and pray toward their land, which you have given to their fathers, in the city which you have chosen, and toward the house which I have built for your name. Then hear from heaven, from the dwelling place, their prayer and supplications, and maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you. We blow the shofar, or trumpet every feast day and Shabbat. Numbers chapter 10, verse 2. Make yourself 2 trumpets of silver, of hammered work you shall make them, and you shall use them for summoning the congregation, and for having the camps set out. When both are blown, all the congregation shall gather themselves to you at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Here are some of the every Hebrew words we use. If you are interested in merchandise, please visit our website at https //mamleketkohaneim.org. Please read if you are interested in becoming a monthly member, giving a donation, or becoming a volunteer. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you all for joining this Shabbat. It's a good day to be in the presence of Yah, to have our family throughout the four corners to come together to give him glory, honor, and praise. We thank him for the day that we are allowed to give him praise, the day that he has set aside from the beginning. That's a sign also of the end. So we thank you for joining, and we have, let me see, my computer is acting up a little bit over here. All right. So we have Shabbat Shalom. Okay, fine. Shabbat Shalom, Mom and Cousin Hazel, and Honorable the Adversary. Awake Now, Shabbat Shalom, Messianic Jew. Shabbat Shalom, Kings and Queens Coaching Group. I think that's Miss Rosemary. Shabbat Shalom, Crawfords, and Shabbat Shalom, Miss Vicky. Thank you all for joining this Shabbat. And got a very good, interesting subject today. A lot of great information that's going to share. That's just it's even some of this has been new to me here recently. So I thought I'd share it to you all as well. But with that said, it's so important just to understand that this is not just for head knowledge, but for us to share it with our people, for all people who actually receive Yahusha and understand where we are right now in the times that we live in. So let this be a lesson for all of us, but also take the things that we're learning as part of this and share it, right? So if it just contains in your head and in your heart, then how is it going to reach the people? And that's the total thing, is to bring salvation to all men who will receive him. So Ezekiel 36, starting with verse 1, is the scripture for the day. And it says, "And you, son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel, and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahuwah. Thus says Yahuwah, because the enemy has spoken against you, aha, and the everlasting heights have become our possession. Therefore prophesy and say, Thus says Yahuwah, for good reason they have made you desolate and crushed you from every side, that you would become a possession of the rest of the nations, and you have been taken up in the talk and the whispering of the people. Therefore, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahuwah. Thus says Yahuwah to the mountains and to the hills, to ravines and to the valleys, to the desolate waste and to the forsaken cities, which have become a prey and a derision to the rest of the nations which are round about. Therefore, thus says Yahuwah, surely in the fire of my jealousy I have spoken against the rest of the nations, and against all Edom, who appropriated my land for themselves as a possession with wholehearted joy and with scorn of soul, to drive it out for a prey. Therefore prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say to the mountains, to the hills, to the ravines, and to the valleys, Thus says Yahuwah, Behold, I have spoken in my jealousy and in my wrath, because you have endured the insults of the nations. Therefore, thus says Yahuwah, I have sworn that surely the nations which are around you themselves endure their insults. But you, O mountains of Israel, you will put forth your branches and bear your fruit for my people Israel, for they will come soon. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn to you, and you will be cultivated and sown. I will multiply men on you, all the house of Israel, all of it. And the cities will be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt. I will multiply on you man and beast, and they will increase and be fruitful. And I will cause you to inhabit it as you were formerly, and will treat you better than at the first. Thus you will know that I am Yahuwah. Yes, I will cause men, my people Israel, to walk on you and possess you, so that you will become their inheritance and never again bereave them of children. Thus says Yahuwah, because they say to you, you are a devourer of men, and have bereaved your nation of children. Therefore you will no longer devour men, and no longer berave your nation of children, declares Yahuwah. I will not let you hear insults from the nations anymore, nor will you bear disgrace from the peoples any longer, nor will you cause your nation to stumble any longer, declares Yahuwah. Then the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel was living in their own land, they defiled it with their ways and their deeds. Their way before me was like the uncleanliness of a woman in her impurity. Therefore I poured out my wrath on them for the blood which they had shed on the land, because they had defiled it with their idols. Also I scattered them among the nations, and they were dispersed throughout the lands. According to their ways and their deeds, I judged them. When they came to the nations where they went, they profaned my holy name, because it was said of them, These are the people of Yahuwah, yet they have come out of his land. But I had concern for my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the nations where they went. Therefore say to the house of Israel, Thus says Yahuwah, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, but for my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations where you went. I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, which you have profaned in their midst. Then the nations will know that I am Yahuwah, declares Yahuwah. Then I will prove myself holy among you in your sight. For I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. Then I will sprinkle water on you, or immerse on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Hallelujah. All right. So let me blow the shofar here. Hallelujah. I don't know what that was. Praise y'all. Somebody gonna have to teach me to do that again. All right. Let us pray. Dear Yah, we just thank you for giving you glory, honor, and praise on your Shabbat. We just thank you for how you loved us and cared for us as we go through all different types of insults and persecution. Forgive us of our sins, of how we went against your ways and how we continue to do so in the lands that we are living in now. Help us to return with our hearts and our minds, with our whole being, with not only us, but our descendants, our children, and our children's children that will come in generations thereafter, by helping us to stand tall, to stand firm, to keep our feet cemented in concrete for you and our love for you. For we just thank you for preserving us throughout the time, and how you still have a desire and a plan for us, not because we are so righteous and so worthy, but for your name's sake. Let it be done. For we know that you spoke from the beginning that you will have a place to take your people that truly love you, to tabernacle with you, just like you did with Adam in the garden, how you want to be in our midst. But because of our sins, you had to depart. And we thank you for sending your son, Yahushua HaMashiach, to come and die for our sins, to love us, to bring away a time of atonement, sacrifice, for us to come back before you in the time that you will send him again, not only as that suffering servant that loved us, but also that conquering king, like David, that's going to come and rescue us in the time of our need. We love you and we thank you for your word, and we thank you for everyone who's gathered here today to come before you, not only here on YouTube, but also throughout the four corners, those that truly love you and desire you and are seeking you with all their heart, mind, and soul. Bless them. Bless us today as well with your word and your direction. In Yahushua's name we do pray. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. So we have a song by my Isha. Hallelujah.
Just give me yours. I'm bound for Mount Zion. way out on the hill. I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. If anybody make it, surely I will. But I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. If anybody make it, surely I will. Surely I will. Oh, surely I will. Surely I will. Oh, surely I will. 'Cause I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. And if anybody make it, surely I will. 'Cause I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. If anybody make it, surely I will. Surely I will. Oh, surely I will. Surely I will. Surely I will. 'Cause I'm bound for Mount Zion, way out on the hill. And if anybody make it, surely I will.
All right, praise Yah, praise Yah. All right, Shabbat Shalom, Cousin Atkinson as well. Hopefully y'all can hear me fine. We're having a little microphone thing going on, so let us know if you're not able to hear us or not. Looks like everything is moving, but it's just got a different color there than we're used to here. So we've been having some issues with our microphone, so please let us know if there's any issues. All right, so with that said, we'll go into some of the lesson for today. All right, so these are some of the videos that we've recently published. This is the one from yesterday that I put out. So talking about the voices of Dimona, their own untold Israeli journey. That's something that AI put out there. So, and also the stars. Sorry about that. I actually had them removed, but for some reason I have to change the cover and put the other one that I had. I think it was some doves or something. But it's talking about continue on the story from before. So that's the reason why we're showing these, is to really build upon what was showed from the previous videos, to show people and give them an understanding of what all we talking about by, our full story of who we are as the Israelites, especially African Israelites spread throughout the world. So here you can actually see in this video where they talk about how Dimona was established from the Village of Peace, where the Israelite that came from Chicago and moved over there, and they live in Israel, and their journey and stuff that they had to go through, and some of their structure. I think that's the next videos we're talking about, their structure. And even this video talks about how they were trying to deport them, right? Even after a lot of the stuff that they had done, they served in the military and everything, but yet they still fight for some of them fight for their citizenship and, all the things that, even some that's been born there, were having some of those issues too. So then we also have the next slide is the one that was previously having. So this is the video about mostly around the Black Jews. So a lot of those, people that went to Dimona came from some of those communities that was in Chicago and around the Black Jews, and some of the history that actually, how the Black Jews started, that was connected to Marcus Garvey and Rabbi Ford. Ford. I don't like saying rabbi, but Ford. And then even how Farrakhan even say that we were Israelites, which is interesting coming from a Nation of Islam perspective. But it just shows you how a lot of these connections, even to the White House, right? Michelle Obama's Gullah Geechee family traditions that's connected to Capers Fune, the black chief Capers Fune, the black Jewish leader of the world. So we can see that there's a lot of connections all around us. So it's this, that's what I'm saying. I'm building these building blocks to take us to show people how all of this stuff is connected. But it didn't start with black Jews, right? Even you heard in Capers Fune, Mr. Capers Fune, gotta give him respect in some way, that he was talking about how they actually came from, connected back to slavery. So, all the people you hear a lot of Christian apologists try to say that it started during that time with Matthew Wentworth and stuff, but you can see that they even say it went back to slavery of the Israelites that went to West Africa and other places that actually came over to the Caribbeans and the, through to America and other places, south of Brazil and other places as well. So it just shows you how we're more connected. Also, and then the next one, we'll talk about, the last one's talking about the conversion. So that's, again, got to understand what's the difference between somebody who converted to Judaism versus a bloodline Israelite, right? That comes from West Africa and other places as well. So those are some of the discussions that's important to understand, because a lot of people don't understand the Halakha and why some people are for it, some people are against it. And then you also, I think there was a video, well, I know it was, about some women. They were, see, it's popular. See, I watched the initial debate, but they were talking about, the difference of their beliefs between Christianity, between black Jews and Hebrew Israelites. So I've seen a lot of people comment on those videos. And then you also saw the one with the pastor, the Christian pastor, Fred Price Jr., when he talks about, the connection to the Israelites and how he talks about his DNA and how we are Israelites. But then he talks about it differently from a spiritual standpoint. So that's what I say. It's important for us to divide the history from the faith, the religion, right? So when you first go in there, just look at the history first. Is the history true? Then let us have a conversation about all the other things, right? Because people still look at all of us as black, right? They just say you black. They don't matter, about our beliefs, Muslim, whatever. They call us, just say we black. So if that's, we all the same people and we share the same DNA, then that means we all share the same storyline. If that goes back to Israel, then we can have a discussion to what that means, not only from a Tanakh standpoint, but also in the Brit Hadashah, right? To me, it's one gospel of Yahusha coming back to redeem man in the name of Yah, for us to dwell with him again in paradise, right? So we got to understand both sides and understand different people's understanding for us to actually come together as a people. So we'll talk a little bit about, how we were divided initially as well. All right. So this is going to be talking about the Ivri heritage facts. So we know, for those who knew, Ivri means Hebrew, and we showed about even how the language of Ivri was the ancient Paleo-Hebrew language, right? That still was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, found in different places, found in Africa, found in America as well. So it's very important to us to understand our heritage for who we are. So next slide, we got the fair use disclaimer. So a lot of this, like we said, we're not, just exposing you to information. Don't mean I agree with it, Mamleket Kohanim, its affiliates, but this is just for us to have these type of discussions for criticism and comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. So thank y'all for allowing us to have the fair use there. So next. So this is the video, and I really want you to listen very close, right? So this is why I was saying stuff, something that's new to me, that, some information, and I don't know who's the person of this site. So, he has a lot, he or she, I guess it could be a she, has a lot of information up here. I don't know if they black, white, what they are, what their background is. So be cautious, right? As well. When people don't show their face and you don't know their names and stuff, and they're leading you in a certain direction, then you have to be careful, right? So, that's the reason why I show my face and stuff like that. A lot of people use my real name is Jay Shear as well, so I'm not hiding any of that. But you know, here, this is important to understand because this, I mean, he's giving a lot of information. I'm trying to figure out from what background he is, because he talks about the Ethiopian Bible a lot, Book of Jubilees, and you know, some of the information that's there. But you know, it's here he's going to talk about more documents. He's talked about, you know, a lot of historical documents from different viewpoints, different nations of people. A lot of what we're finding that I see now is more from the, you know, documentation from Europe that I see, or America, that a lot of Israelites put out there now. But he puts out a lot of stuff from you know, the Muslims, right? Some of their texts, Arabian texts, as well as some of the ones that actually came to West Africa, and some things that was said even there. And he talks about the Moors, some of the documentation there. So, you know, he really touched Ethiopian documents and stuff. So it's like somebody who has some kind of background in history or research or something. So I'm thankful for the information that he's putting out, but like I said, I don't know from what way he's taking us or she's taking us. But this is one of the videos here. It says why Portugal spent 100 years searching for Judah in Africa. So this is going to be very interesting to connect to some of the things that I have taught. And after it's finished, I'll, you know, bring some of that stuff back up just so we can, you know, make a connection. So, you know, all this information is out there. It's one thing, but when you start connecting with DNA and your own genealogy, that's why we want you to, you know, do your own family lineage. If it's you don't trust DNA, I hear people talk about that, you know, just working in IT, I'm just telling you, they hack hospitals and all that stuff. So they probably has a lot of people. They got, you know, the Netanyahu's son's DNA. You know, I think they can get yours if they can get somebody, a prime minister of Israel's DNA. So, you know, they can hack into other people's as well. So it's good for you to know your own DNA and your lineage because, you know, as I said, working in IT, there's a form of discrimination where they're going to discriminate people based on your DNA. And if you don't know what DNA you have, you could be discriminated from and don't even know, especially with today. Back in the day, you had to go to the banks and stuff, right? And apply for a loan. They'll say no. And you know, you have a connection with that bank. You know who said no, what bank you came from. But now it's getting to a point where discrimination is very hard to see because it's all in algorithms and, you know, about the medicine that you get at hospitals. There's something called the AI ethics. So sometimes it'll say, based on research and racism and how a lot of stuff happened around gynecology, you know, how this man basically did a whole bunch of experiments on slaves. And he said that black women can take more pain than others, right? It's gruesome when you look at the history of what was done for some of that research that was done in the past. Even some people talk about how Hitler was inspired to what he did to Jewish people in the Holocaust, how he got inspired and information from what happened in slavery in America and what they did to us. So there's definitely a history of that. So if they have that in the algorithm, you go to the hospital, AI is going to say, hey, this could give you less medicine for pain than the next person of other ethnicities because of that discrimination of your background. So just be aware of that. You know, I try to get more kids, especially our kids, to go in AI ethics and at least look at that because we're going to need somebody to defend us because all these big decisions now, you always hear AI. So we need to understand that. And then once we understand our own DNA as well, it'll help us to connect our history to, you know, the Bible, right? There's some reason why we don't know our history, African Americans, when they know where they took us from. They can tell you tell you about pharaohs and, you know, ancient people of Mesopotamia and stuff like that. And we only been in captivity for 400 years. You can't tell me where I came from in 400 years. Like, you don't know nothing about my history before 400 years. Like, that should be easy, right? Especially during a time when they were documenting stuff. So this is interesting, that some of the stuff that they documented. So we'll show this and I'll stop it where it's necessary. All right.
Before you scroll past this, I need you to stay for just 60 seconds because what I'm about to show you changes everything you thought you knew about the slave trade. Not a little, everything. Most people think the transatlantic slave trade was about one thing: cheap labor. Millions of African bodies shipped across the ocean to build plantations and economies. That is the story every textbook tells, and that story is only half true. Because there is another layer, a layer that powerful institutions spent centuries trying to bury. A layer hidden inside a document, a real physical document that was locked away in a Portuguese royal archive for over 400 years. And when researchers finally cracked it open, they didn't find a shipping manifest, they didn't find a labor contract, they found a list, a hit list, with names, with bloodlines, with
right? That there's some documentation that hasn't been discovered, well, not discovered, that hasn't been looked at, right? There's a lot of information that's out there about the slave trade that, you know, people haven't translated from the different languages. And it's interesting to me now as well because, you know, you can put documents in AI now and it will translate it for you. So what's the hesitancy of now, you know, taking that stuff and scanning it and doing stuff I don't know. You know, it's like they want people to comb through it first to see what's there before they make it. But I'm like, hey, well, it's just put it out there like they putting aliens and UFO files out there. Why can't you put some of this stuff out there for other people to help research? You know, I also found there's this place in Angola that they have all these documents, and I think they finally got them and put it in tried to start scanning them. This was years back. In some place, but you know, they were there, they were getting mildew, they were, you know, not being kept in a good stance. So it's like all that stuff is just getting corroded. And even in the, you know, libraries of Timbuktu and stuff, you know, they had to hide their documents because people were trying to burn them and stuff like that. So sounds kind of strange to me about why can't they allow, but he's going to, you know, kind of give his opinion in a positive way. But I'm just like, why can't they just put that stuff out there just so we can see it? Like, what's the hesitancy? But listen close, all right?
Specific African kingdoms marked for destruction, not because of their land, not because of their gold, but because of who they were descended from. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to see the African continent and the history of slavery with completely different eyes. Let's go back, way back, to the early 1500s. Most Americans, when they picture Africa at this time, picture a continent of isolated villages, no kingdoms, no written records, no organized power. That image is not history. That image is propaganda. In the early 15th century, West and Central Africa was home to some of the most sophisticated political structures on the planet. The Kingdom of Benin, in present-day Nigeria, had walls that archaeologists now estimate were 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China. The Mali Empire had already produced Mansa Musa, a king so wealthy that when he made his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he accidentally crashed the gold market of the entire Mediterranean world just by spending his own personal money. The Songhai Empire had universities, real universities. In Timbuktu, scholars were studying astronomy, law, mathematics, and theology, while Europe was still burning people at the stake for asking the wrong questions. This is the world that the Portuguese sailed into, and here is what most people do.
So you hear that, right? There's a lot of stuff that they made it seem like we was just people like, you know, monkeys swinging off of trees, and they decided it just needed some help over here in America. So they just went and grabbed us like monkeys and brought us over to do some work, right? That's what you hear in most of the story. But when you hear all the stuff that was actually there, you know, walls that's longer than the Great Walls of China, right? That's supposed to have been one of the marvels of the world. I heard recently, because of what happened here, they went back and remeasured all the walls of China they try to go through. Now they say it's a little bit longer than what was originally done in Benin. I'm like, somebody need now to go back and measure Benin again to see if it's actually longer or not. But you can actually see that they were very intelligent to do that, right? And they had some of the houses that they had. The road could fit like hundreds of people in one house. So you have to have some pretty good archaeology to do some of the stuff that they were doing. I mean, building to actually construction to do some of the stuff they were doing. They had libraries, right, in West Africa. Some of the first libraries and universities in the world in West Africa, right? So you know about the Moors, even when the Dark Ages, and how they actually went up to Spain and Portugal, ruled there for 700 years, and brought algebra and, you know, about 3-course meals and changing your clothes and keeping animals separate from the housing because of diseases and all the stuff that they brought there, right? Like, it just shows you that we were very intelligent people here. They even talk about, there's what's his name? Can't think of a historian. Maybe I'll show him one day. Secular Black historian. He tells you what truly they don't tell you in history about how even in West Africa, they found boots and stuff. They act like we just run around with flip-flops, and that's cool, you know, the fact that we do that. But, you know, they had other stuff that was there. Who wants to wear boots when it's like 100 degrees outside? But they actually had that technology out there way back then, and how they had like street lights and stuff way back then. But a lot of people don't realize is when they conquered and tore up the wall, they didn't want any, how you call it, resilience or self-esteem be put back into the West Africans, because well, wherever they conquered it throughout Africa, because then they might revolt, right? They get pride, you know, you're important people, and now you might rise up, right? So they wouldn't allow them to rebuild the wall. They wouldn't allow them to do a lot of the stuff that showed any symbol of intelligence, right? So the next generations that come will be more docile, you know, they'll be more discouraged. You can see that even in our community here, where kids don't think, you know, that we were worth nothing, and then they'll go and, you know, be gang members and stuff because they think that's all life is for them, that they can't achieve great things. But we were great people before slavery. So, you know, they actually stripped us from our clothes and stuff, right? Got us naked. And that's how they took us overseas, to make us look like, you know, to kind of bring the people that was enslaving us to not look at us as human, to look at us more like a mule or, you know, a monkey, like I said, right? So just think about those things now, that showing that how great we were even before. So even in Spain and Portugal, they have empty cities. How did the cities become empty? Because of the Inquisition, right? They're clearing out people out of the cities and stuff. So go look at an old video about Spain and Portugal and the cities and how they empty. Now they're trying to get people to come back and live in those cities and stuff. It's just amazing when you start really looking at our true history before the slave trade. All right.
No. The Portuguese were not the first Europeans to arrive, randomly stumbling upon Africa. They were sent, with specific instructions, from the highest levels of the Catholic Church and the Portuguese crown. And those instructions were not simply, go find people to work our fields. The instructions were far more specific than that, and far more disturbing. To understand what the Portuguese were doing, you have to understand who Portugal was. In 1492, Spain expelled its Jewish population in what became known as the Alhambra Decree. Hundreds of thousands of Sephardic Jews were forced out. Many fled to Portugal. Many converted under pressure. Many scattered across North Africa and into sub-Saharan Africa over the following generations. This is documented history, not conspiracy. The descendants of those scattered communities brought with them something the Portuguese crown became obsessed with tracking: bloodlines. Specifically, bloodlines connected to the ancient tribe of Judah. Now let me be very clear here. This is where history gets complicated, and I want to be careful and accurate. I am not making a claim about religion. I am not making a claim about race. I am presenting what historians and archaeologists have documented, which is that the Portuguese crown in the 15th century was deeply invested in locating, cataloging, and in some cases eliminating specific royal and priestly lineages that had survived from ancient Near Eastern communities and had migrated into sub-Saharan Africa over centuries. The reasons they gave were religious and political, the methods they used were devastating, and the evidence is written down. Now let's talk about the document itself. And here I want to be precise, because this video deals with real historical research, not folklore. Portuguese colonial archives, particularly those housed in the Arquivo Histórico Ultramarino in Lisbon, contain thousands of documents from the 16th century that have never been fully translated into English and have never been made accessible to mainstream audiences. Among these documents are royal.
Here we said it has all those thousands of documents, right? That's in there that haven't been translated, right, into English. So it's interesting sometimes when you talk to different communities of people, how they see things or have information that we don't have here in America. So that's the reason why it's so important for us to link up and connect to our people throughout the four corners. And people are like, who's our people? You know, it's just, that's why you do DNA, right? Like, I'm connecting with cousins in Sudan. He's my Sudanese cousin, just sharing all this information. He's Muslim, but he knows we're the Israelites, right? Like, he's sharing all this information about our family and stuff, and I'm connected to empires and stuff of people, and I'm like, wow. So, you know, you can even find people connected to you throughout Persia and throughout, well, Iran. Well, that's Persia now. Got some connections there, right? Got connections in, Middle East. I got cousins, Israeli cousins. I don't know if that's through slave trade or the Sephardic Jews or what that connection is, but there's people all throughout the world, family in Spain and Portugal that's helping me find information and stuff. So it's important, that's why we do the workshops. So you can find Igbo, right? Cousins. Some, Miss Rosemary here, she's been finding Igbo cousins, most I've seen. I'm like, wow, a lot of different cousins. Another Ark there, Devon, he's been finding family from the Mali Kingdom and I think the Soninke people and stuff, right? Like, we're making these connections now with our family throughout all the four corners. You can find connections to cousins over in even over in like the Fijis and the Philippines. And it's interesting, the people over in the Fijis say that they're the Israelites too. So I'm like, that's four corners, right? So it's important for us to understand these different traditions and put them together and then try to preserve them for our next generations to come. So that's what we're trying to do with Memleket Kohanim. It's one thing to just have videos. It's another thing to actually start preserving stuff, right? So that's what we really would like to do. So if you have those talents and abilities to do those type of things, if you know about these different places, which he's going to talk a little bit more about this, you speak Portuguese, right? I don't speak Portuguese. If you want to wait until I can speak Portuguese, we probably won't get this information, right? So it takes you and your talents and your abilities and your desires for us as a people to come together in order to share, right, with one another too. So, if you have those skills and abilities, do so. But he's going to talk about these documents. Never heard nobody talk about this before. But so that's why I say I think he or she has some kind of connection, or she has, might be a historian or something like that too. All right.
Dispatches called
All right, so we had a little problem there, but you can actually see how, you know, this information is very important for us because he's starting to map out certain things over in Africa, right? So we can see even in some of the books and stuff that you see from like Duke University, from the book that we talk a lot about, from Alan Godby, where he actually maps out all these different tribes throughout West Africa in 1930. Like, he didn't have the internet. How did he know about all these different tribes and different people who are connected to the Israelites or connected to, you know, Judaism, and some of them could have been converts. But how did he connect all those people way back then? And now we got more technology and more ability to do this stuff, and we can't figure it out, right? Like, something don't seem right to me. Something's off. So that's why, like I said, it's important for you to take this information, and, you know, if you're older and you got children, teach them, right? The elders are supposed to be the preserver of knowledge within our community, to share to the next generations, right? So it's very important for us to be able to give it to the next generation while they're in schools. That's why I tell people to come up, especially when I was a youth pastor, especially now that I'm a youth pastor in the truth, but I used to be like, you know, do some of the black inventions and stuff. We don't just have to talk about Madam C.J. Walker and all those different things, right? George Washington Carver. It's great that we keep those stories preserved in our community, but there's so much more stuff that we're not even exposed to, like this. Right? What happened to us in slavery? These kids are smart, you know. They can, you know, they might be messing up in school, but I can see how they be hacking in people's accounts and doing stuff. So I'm like, we might use that for some good. No, not that we need to hack into stuff, but, you know, use that skill and ability to use chat. Kids are always using ChatGPT for everything, which is scary to me, really, because ChatGPT is not always right, but it's still, you know, showing that they have that capacity and that learning ability to do some of those things, right? So this was just 1960s, right, when we got equal rights, right? So over in those 60 years, we've already built up enough knowledge and ability that we've now have basically equaled a lot of the other nations that, well, especially the nations that enslaved us, or other nations, right, that had a longer time to get to where we all are today. So it shows you that we have some intellect, very strong intellect, if we use it in a positive way, right, and nurture it. Right? Don't talk about kids and say, oh, you know, I remember going to college in some places, even some churches was down. Like, oh, you looking at going to college? I'm like, what's wrong with that, right? You know, even some neighborhoods, the college boy might be the ones everybody gets jealous. Well, he going to college. We're going to get him. Like, why would you want to get him? Because he going to college. Like, you want to bring him down. Oh, he think he's all that. So we need to start embracing our people, and even those that don't go to college, right? Nowadays, you have kids now, young adults that don't go to college, and especially now as Israelites, they're like scholars. I mean, they be reading them books and stuff. You're like, wow, somebody's coming out of jail, right? They messed up their life, and they, you know, trying to get it back right. They're coming out of jail, and they had time to do all that reading. They come with all this knowledge and stuff that they learned while they had time to sit and to think about themselves, think about their lives, but also to read. So, you know, there's so much that's happening with our people, and we can use it to our advantage if we just come together. Okay, looks like the video's fixed.
Specific religious structures within African kingdoms before the ships ever left port. Where did they get this intelligence? From missionaries, from Jewish converts known as conversos, who had family and trade connections deep inside Africa, and from a network of informants that had been building for decades before the large-scale slave trade began. Let me ask you something, and I want you to think about this honestly. If this was purely about labor, why did the Portuguese need a list of bloodlines? Why did they need maps of priestly lineages? Why did their documents specifically distinguish between those fit for labor and those who must not be allowed to reproduce? Think about that. Now, let's address the part of this story that most people have never been taught, the connection between ancient Judah and the kingdoms of West and Central Africa. This is not mythology. This is documented through multiple independent lines of historical evidence. First, the Lemba people of southern Africa. The Lemba are a Bantu-speaking people who have maintained for generations that they are descended from ancient Semitic traders who migrated from the north thousands of years ago. For a long time, historians dismissed this as oral mythology, until 2000, when genetic studies published in the American Journal of Human Genetics confirmed that Lemba men carry the Cohen modal haplotype, a specific genetic marker found predominantly in Jewish priestly families. The DNA matched. The oral tradition was correct. Second, the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, also known as the Falasha, a Jewish community in Ethiopia that maintained Hebrew religious practices, observance of Shabbat, dietary laws, and priestly structures, completely isolated from the rest of the Jewish world for potentially over 2,000 years. Their origin is still debated among scholars, but their existence is not. Third, and this is where it gets deeply interesting, historians have documented that certain West African kingdoms, particularly in the region of present-day Nigeria, Benin, and Ghana, maintained religious and legal codes that showed striking structural similarities to ancient Hebrew law. Circumcision practices, new moon festivals, priestly castes with hereditary roles, purification rituals that mirror those described in ancient texts. Now, I want to pause here. I am not telling you what to believe about where these practices came from. There are multiple academic theories: independent development, ancient trade contact, migration patterns, all are on the table. What I am telling you is this: the Portuguese crown believed these connections were real. They documented those beliefs, and they acted on them. Before I go further, I want to know what you think. Drop in the comments. Did you ever learn any of this in school? Because I didn't, and I have a feeling neither did you. Among the most closely guarded documents in the Portuguese colonial archive are a series of charts drawn up between roughly 1540 and 1760 that do not look like ordinary navigation maps. Ordinary navigation maps of this era showed coastlines, currents, and port depths. These charts showed something different. They showed the interior of Africa divided not by geography, but by genealogy. Specific regions were labeled with terms that historians have identified as references to tribal lineages. Certain communities were marked with what researchers have translated as "of the old blood," a phrase that appears repeatedly in correspondence between Portuguese governors and the royal court. Other communities were marked with phrases indicating they were considered religiously dangerous, meaning their priestly or royal authority was seen as a direct ideological threat to Portuguese Catholic expansion. And the communities marked as most dangerous were consistently located in the same zones that experienced the most violent and targeted slave raids in the following decades. Not random coastal raids, targeted. Interior expeditions, going hundreds of miles inland, past easier targets, to reach specific villages, specific families, specific lineages. Now let me ask you a question that no textbook will ask. If you were hunting for labor, why would you march past dozens of coastal villages to travel deep into the jungle for a specific group of people? You wouldn't, unless you weren't hunting for labor. Unless you were hunting for something else entirely. Let's be precise about how this worked, because this isn't just theory, this is documented in the mechanics of the trade itself. Historians have long noted something puzzling.
So that right there, is what I always thought. It's like, why would you, in Africa, especially when we went to Ghana, we had a trip, Ronald Dalton, if you know him, he had a whole bunch of African Americans go over to Ghana. And there was the last bath. And in Ghana, they talked about where they took the last bath before. Maybe I should have brought some pictures. But before they got on the slave boat, because, they went and through all the woods and they were all, kept in the prison, El Mina dungeon. I was told to call it the dungeon, not the castle. They call it El Mina Castle. but they told me to call it El Mina Dungeon because it was a slave dungeon. They actually had a church in the middle of the slave dungeon. But after they go through all the stuff that it's just horrible, you know, have you almost in tears, or if not in tears, going through the tour and seeing what they did and how the women and had to deal with all their stuff and had to get, you know, raped. They couldn't take baths and all that. So then they actually took them and gave them the last bath right before they sent them on the boat. And they talked about how they took them from hundreds and hundreds of miles and how they had to go through the woods, and you know, some of them get attacked by animals, and how some of the men had to take the women, put on their shoulders to go through rivers. And you're like, why do they have to go so deep to get all those slaves? Like, what was it always was in my mind, like, why didn't they just pick up the local people? But some of the local people, they said that they were around the castles and stuff. I think that was the Fonte. And, you know, they just never thought about what was going on. You know, anytime they could have just all rose up together and just attacked the castle. And, you know, they could easily overpower them with the number of people. And they did sometimes as well. But that makes sense. And Miss Rosemary, Shabbat Shalom to you and Nathan. But she's right. She talks about how in the 60s and 70s, they always had had us walking around looking uncivilized, barefoot and naked. So, you know, that's exactly the kind of mind. It's a brainwashing that they want to do to all of us, even now, right? Certain information, material they don't want people to know about that is known, that's out there. And sometimes it's right there before us, and we just been brainwashed so much in thinking that, oh, you know, believe what they said, you know, like, well, who was it? You know, back in the day, they used to teach way back, they're talking about the moon was cheese and stuff, right? The world was flat and stuff like that with, you know, with the maps, and you can fall off the edge of the world and stuff like that. So it's like, you know, a lot of those things that still in our mindset now is like, you know, why are nobody's been in the spaceship to go and look above the world to see what it is, right? But we're so caught up one way or the other about, you know, the earth round, earth flat. Everybody wants to fight about that. And it's like, why? Why does that matter when it comes to, but the brainwashing comes in, right? So even with these things, we've been told you're not the Israelites. No way, you're just, you know, a black West African and stuff. You know, it's like, well, even that, okay, West Africans had libraries and universities. Why do you tell me that? So a lot of this information is hidden for a reason, and we got to ask why. Why, like I said, 400 years ago, should be easy to get this information, but it's known in certain circles, so we'll talk a little bit about that after the video too. Oh, Shabbat Shalom, cousin LaShonda. Good to see you as well.
About the earliest phase of the Atlantic slave trade, particularly the Portuguese phase from roughly 1441 to 1600. The pricing structure didn't make sense if this was purely about labor. Certain categories of enslaved people commanded prices 10 to 20 times higher than others, not because of physical strength, not because of agricultural skill, but because of what the Portuguese documents called qualidade, meaning quality or character, which historians have traced to mean lineage and social rank. Why would a plantation economy pay a premium for social rank? Plantations don't care about titles. Plantations care about bodies. But if your goal is the systematic elimination of a leadership class, if your goal is to remove the religious and royal authority from specific communities, then you need to make sure you're capturing the right people. And that is exactly what the pricing structure reflects. The most expensive categories of enslaved people in early Portuguese records were described not by physical characteristics, they were described by social and hereditary role. Priests, chiefs, and members of royal families. This is not speculation. This is in the ledgers. This is in the ship manifests. Historians have had this data for decades. The question is, why isn't it in the textbooks? I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the suppression of this information is accidental, or do you think it's deliberate? No wrong answer. This is exactly the kind of question historians fight about. Let me know where you stand. Now let's go deeper, because to understand why Portugal was so specifically focused on African bloodlines and priestly lineages, you have to understand the ideological framework of 1500s Catholic Europe. This was the era of the Inquisition, the era of limpieza de sangre, which translates literally as purity of blood. This was an actual legal doctrine in Spain and Portugal that determined a person's rights, religious standing, and social status based on their ancestry. If you had Jewish or Muslim ancestry, even generations back, you were suspect. You could be investigated, you could lose property, you could be imprisoned. Now take that same obsession with bloodlines and religious authority and point it at Africa, at communities that maintained ancient religious traditions, at priestly lineages that the Portuguese believed were descended from the very same source that their own Inquisition was trying to eradicate in Europe. Suddenly, the picture becomes very different. This wasn't just economics. This was a continuation of a religious campaign, a campaign that had already expelled Jews from Spain, already forced conversions across Portugal, already burned manuscripts in Granada, and was now extending itself across the ocean into Africa, targeting communities that the Portuguese crown believed carried the same dangerous bloodlines and the same dangerous religious authority. The historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalami, in his landmark work on Sephardic history, documented the remarkable survival of Judaic practice across scattered communities across Africa and the Americas. He did not frame this as mythology, he framed it as historical tragedy, the deliberate hunting and erasure of communities precisely because of their cultural and genealogical identity. That is the context within which the 1550 Portuguese documents must be read. Let's name some of the specific kingdoms that historians believe were directly targeted. First, the Kingdom of Nri, in present-day southeastern Nigeria. Nri was one of the oldest and most sophisticated kingdoms in West Africa, and unusually, it was led not by a warrior class, but by a priestly class. The Eze Nri was a spiritual king, a ritual authority, whose power came not from military force, but from religious legitimacy. Nri had an explicit prohibition against slavery within its own borders, documented by anthropologists, and its priests were known across a wide region as the ultimate arbiter.
So you see how much information was out there, right? And then even it talks about the bloodline, how they were tracking people's bloodline. So you don't think them having, being able to trace the line of King David. You just go to Yahya Negro, just type in that name on the Jewish Encyclopedia website, and it has the lineage all the way down to how they connect to King David, right? That they kept their history and records. And his last name is Negro, Yahya Negro, right? So a lot of times they say, oh no, he's given that name because of the city that he ran, but it shows there was other people who had the last name Negro, or they called them Negro because they were black, right? So, and even that thought of them saying that came later, even in history. So they can't even document why they say that now. But if they're able to keep track of his family, do you think that they just lost track of them when they sent them through slavery? Right? Send them to, what countries they sent them as, what was it called? It was degradados, those who were exiled because of crime, and said that the royal families of Spain and Portugal were sent to Brazil, to Angola, and I want to say it's Guinea. There's another place that I'm not sure. But they were sent, the royal families were sent to those countries to be exiled, right? So now, if you know about Sao Tome and Principe and, what happened to, we showed that 1492, they keep on talking about 1492, right? Some of the same things you start hearing over and over and over again. So if they sent those families there and they know the last names of the descendants of Yahya Negro, right? So if you know Rodriguez and some of these other names, right? They kept track of those names. You can actually go back and find some of those cousins, Oliver, Hernandez, some of the other names that I've seen. And then even how those, Lewis, right? Some of those names got anglicized as well. You can track that. So I've looked up some of these people and tried to just go on Ancestry, like I told you, take some of these names, plop them in there, as I show some of you during our workshops, and see if they pop up. And you'll be amazed how some of these names will pop up that's related to you, and that they actually know their connection back to Spain and Portugal, and they have Sephardic heritage, and they have some documents also connected. So, this is the part where I'm saying that Yah is allowing us to connect back through all this technology and all these records, right, that they have. And it's so important for us to do this, right, in order to not just talk about what happened to our people in the past and how we got there and how we're so important people now, and that gives us confidence, but also when it comes to prophecy. So Yah has been keeping track of this himself through all these ages, and he knows, definitely, and he's going to bring us back together again. So it's an exciting time for us to be in. And now they're going to talk about particular tribes. So, like I told Miss Rosemary, she's found Igbos and stuff. So, hey, let's see what clans we come from, right? So now we can actually reach out to our family members who are real people today, that us over in Africa, over in Spain, over in all the different places that know their family lines, right? So it's one thing, it's hard to look on Google and Google a family line, right? But each family knows their oral history of their family. I know who my mama's mama, right? I know that, right? At least 3 generations, most people know. I know even more than that now because of documents and stuff and family history and stuff. So that oral history that we basically have, just based upon what we do know, is so important. So that's why I tell people, go record. If your grandma, your great grandma, great great uncle, those people still around, go and record them and ask them to talk about the family history. Because once this generation right here passes away, it's going to be very hard for you to do that. So you need to go ahead and get whatever information you can while they're still alive and record it. So you at least have something, write it down if you can. Now, stuff will transcribe videos for you. You don't have to write it down by hand, but record them. Make sure it's clear and keep that for the family. So that's what I did with my family with the Black Portuguese history. I'm still kind of debating if I should show that. But when my great aunt, she told me about our Black Portuguese history, and I was like, oh, wow. And now the whole family knows about it, which they heard, some of them, the older ones heard a little bit of it, but now they actually heard, from her own mouth, before she just passed away a couple of years ago, before she was murdered in the hit and run. So it's so important that you get your information together, all right? So he's going to go through certain tribes, and do you connect to these tribes? And some of these tribes, like in Benin, that I found out, connects to some of these family that was connected to King David. So now it's just not, I heard this, I heard these people in Israel, I heard these people went, the Israelites went to West Africa. No, now you can trace your lineage to some of these places. So that's why, I've been doing for all these years, and why Memleket Kohanim came about, because I want not only to do it for myself, but I want other people to do it to show who we are as a people. All right? Thank you.
Of ritual purity and social order. This kingdom was systematically targeted in some of the most violent slave raids of the 16th and 17th centuries. The anthropologist M.A. Onwejogwu, in his 1981 study of the Igbo Ukwu civilization, documented that the destruction of Nri's religious infrastructure correlated almost precisely with the escalation of Portuguese slave raids in the Niger Delta region. Second, the Kingdom of Congo. Now, the Kingdom of Congo is better documented in Western history because it actually had diplomatic relations with Portugal. But what is rarely taught is that within the Kingdom of Congo, there were specific priestly clans known as the Nanga, whose authority the Portuguese found particularly threatening, not politically, religiously. Portuguese Jesuit missionaries wrote extensively about the difficulty of converting Congolese communities because the existing religious authority was too deeply entrenched, too organized, too legitimate in the eyes of the people. And the records show that the targeting of specific Nanga lineages was discussed at the highest levels of Portuguese colonial administration, not just as a religious inconvenience to be preached away, but as a political problem requiring a more permanent solution. Third, the Kingdom of Dahomey in present-day Benin. Dahomey is often taught in American schools as a kingdom that participated in the slave trade, and this is true. But what is rarely taught is what was happening inside Dahomey before and during that participation. Historians have documented that Dahome's royal lineage maintained traditions, including royal naming ceremonies, purification rites, and ancestral veneration practices that showed remarkable structural parallels with ancient Near Eastern religious traditions. Whether those parallels came from ancient contact, from shared human religious development, or something else entirely is genuinely debated. What is not debated is that the Portuguese were intensely interested in mapping and controlling those religious structures. Here's a question I want you to sit with, and please debate this in the comments because historians genuinely disagree here. If West African kingdoms maintained religious and legal structures similar to ancient Hebrew traditions, is that more likely because of ancient migration and contact, or independent development, or something else? Tell me what you think. This is the kind of question that archaeologists and historians are actively arguing about right now. I want to know where you land. Now let's talk about why this story is not in your history textbook. And I want to be fair here. There are multiple reasons, and not all of them are sinister. Reason 1. Language barrier. The vast majority of Portuguese colonial documents have never been translated into English. The archive in Lisbon contains tens of millions of pages of documents. Most of them remain accessible only to researchers who read 16th century Portuguese, which is a very small community. When something isn't translated, it doesn't enter the mainstream conversation. That's not a conspiracy, that's a resource problem. Reason 2. Disciplinary silos. The researchers who work on Portuguese colonial history are often different from the researchers who work on African religious history, who are different from the researchers who work on Sephardic Jewish history. The connections between these fields require someone to sit at all three intersections at once, which is rare, difficult, and often academically thankless work. Reason 3, and this one is more uncomfortable. The narrative of the slave trade as purely economic is easier to process than the alternative. If the slave trade was purely about labor and greed, it was monstrous but comprehensible. Greed is something humans understand. But if the slave trade was also, at least in part, a deliberate campaign to identify, capture, and eliminate specific hereditary communities because of who they were descended from, that is a different category of crime entirely. That moves it from exploitation into something that modern international law would categorize differently. And that categorization has implications, legal, moral, and political, that many institutions would prefer not to examine. I'm not telling you what conclusion to draw. I'm telling you the question exists, and it deserves to be asked. Now, I want to be honest.
Now, just that part real quick when he talks about legal, right, impacts, right, implications. So just think about what's happening now with the UN, right, just saying that the transatlantic slave trade was the greatest atrocity known to man, even though it's not binding, right, like they're not forcing countries to, to do it, but, U.S., Argentina, and Israel are the ones that voted against it, and then some of the European countries just didn't vote one way or the other, but it still got passed. So think about it now. So since they basically recognized that at the UN level, and now if some of this information starts to come out, right, and so many other people got reparations, they got money just because, even in Israel, they say that they are God's chosen people, right? God's chosen people. So, some people bless them that bless you, curse those that curse you. Some people use that, and even in our government, at hearings and stuff. And now if they find out we are Israelites, how does that look at now? How would that change so much of politics, legally, money, so much stuff would be impacted, not just from America sending money, right? How many people had a hand in that system of slave trade all throughout different nations of people too? So just think about that. This is why this is important, right? It's not just stuff that it's just nice to know. This is very important information that could actually change a lot of the different perspectives around the world. All right? Yeah. We got a couple more minutes and we'll stop it.
With you about something. Not every historian agrees with the framework I've been laying out in this video. and I think you deserve to hear the other side. There are serious scholars, serious, rigorous people who argue that the targeted bloodline theory overstates the organizational coherence of the early Portuguese slave trade. Their argument goes like this: the slave trade was chaotic, opportunistic, and driven by local African intermediaries as much as by European demand. Portuguese captains often had limited knowledge of the interior. The pricing differentials for high-status individuals reflected market value within African political economies, not a Portuguese conspiracy to eliminate specific lineages. And the religious framing, the idea that Portugal was on a systematic campaign against Judaic bloodlines in Africa, goes beyond what the documents can definitively prove. These are fair arguments. They deserve respect. What I would say in response is this: even if the trade was not organized as a top-down conspiracy, that does not mean the outcomes were random. Even if individual Portuguese captains were acting on greed rather than ideology, that does not mean the ideological framework didn't exist at the highest levels. History is rarely pure conspiracy or pure chaos. It is usually something more complicated. Institutions with ideological agendas operating through actors motivated by profit and fear, with results that serve the institutional agenda whether or not every individual intended them. The documents exist, the pricing structures exist, the geographic patterns of rating exist. The question of how to interpret them is genuinely open, and that is exactly why this story matters, because it's a story we haven't finished telling yet. Let's come back to the human level, because at the end of all this, the archives, the documents, the theories, there are people, millions of people, ripped from their homes, separated from their languages, their families, their traditions, transported across an ocean. And here is what the archaeological and genealogical record shows. The communities that were most heavily targeted in the early Portuguese slave raids were disproportionately communities with strong priestly or royal structures. The communities that suffered the highest rates of cultural erasure were disproportionately those with the most developed religious legal systems. Whether that was intentional policy or the unintended result of targeting high-status individuals who commanded higher prices, the outcome was the same. The most culturally and religiously organized communities were the most completely dismantled. Their descendants arrived in the Americas stripped of language, of names, of genealogy, deliberately stripped, because in the Americas, an enslaved person who did not know their name could not claim a lineage. An enslaved person who did not know their language could not organize around their traditions. An enslaved person who did not know their history could not assert a legal or moral claim based on that history. And so the erasure, whether it was planned from the beginning or whether it was maintained because it was convenient, the erasure was thorough.
All right, so hopefully that helped a lot to actually see something. You might want to refresh the slides. But to see some of the stuff that actually, to hear it from a perspective, at least I haven't heard from it before, with some of the documents and stuff that they actually say and gave the locations of some of these places, right? So that's why I think it's very important. It gave names of people that was doing research for the Igbos, and that's what you should be taking and Googling, right? So to see what they actually said, see what is available in those different places, right? So we showed the thing about firstblacks.org from the Dominican Study Institute, some of those universities, and how they have on their site Portuguese documents, right? And I showed you how those connect to some of the one of the documents that's connected to the African American International Museum down in South Carolina, in Charleston, right? So there's some kind of connection. Where are they getting this stuff from? Where is this stuff? Who are the people that's putting information out? And that's why we need each other's help to actually look through this, right? So, it's just not just coming here and just listening and going to other people's YouTubes. We need people that actually have the willing heart to go and, you know, like I do. I'm nobody special. I just sit up there and write letters, write emails, trying to find out who these people are, write authors. And that's basically how I started with a lot contacting Israelite authors, right? Like I said, Ronald Dalton just, you know, had his number, called him, and that's how I was able to find him. Or like Lee Cummins and, you know, even trying to reach out now to even some of the European scholars and stuff, right? Just to hear what they say. If they're saying something about Israelites in West Africa, somebody should be contacting them and talking to them, right? Like, why are you saying this about my community of people? So those are some of the things that will help us if you're willing to help, because this is not just a YouTube, or not. I'm not a YouTube. What do you call it? YouTube. Social media, whatever you call it, influencer. I try to, this is a nonprofit. We actually are doing stuff for a community, for youth in the community, over in Africa, people. You know, we're trying to actually help our people throughout the four corners, and we just expose that and try to get knowledge through some of these things and expose information too. So that's the reason why the videos are, you know, we don't have the best videos in the world. I show other people videos because I want to make sure that they get recognition. Right, go to their site, go look up history morsels and find out what he's talking about or she's talking about. You know, that's how we grow together, because we're one people. All right. So with that said, the next slide, what we're talking about here. So these are some of the places you heard, right? So that's what I'm saying. We need to write down some of the stuff. Some of the stuff that they say in these videos, write it down. This is what I do. Write it down and just Google it, right? You got ChatGPT. People look at it for their hairstyles and medical concerns and, you know, about entertainment, who did what and, and who their background is. Let's use it for the things of Yah, right? Like, who are these people and how can we get resources? Who the people that knows it? And ChatGPT is not the best thing in the world, but you know, at least gives us some type of lead to get to find more information. All right, so next.
Somebody made a comment.
All right.
About kinetics, chamber degrees will guide you all.
All right, I don't know much about that, so thank you for sharing. I guess we'll have to look more into that to see exactly what that is, but thank you for sharing. But then we can see here, you know, this is what, like I said, the Lost Tribe myth, I showed this before. This is basically the information from that Duke University book. Like I said, got a map with all these different tribes everywhere, right? And then in it, it talks about the same thing the man said. So hundreds of thousands of slaves were transported to America from West Africa during the trade, which started some 400 years ago. What traces of Judaism still remain among the Negroes of West Africa at this period? To the extent that they were persecuted, they were more likely than other Negroes to be seized during wars and sold as slaves. It's virtually certain that many part Jewish Negroes were among those sent as slaves to America. So it's saying the same thing, right? Like, there's certain, how were they able to discover that? Right, like 1930. Well, I think this is an article referencing the 1930 book, but how would they know that, right? And then they have a whole association, ISSAJ, the International Society for the Study of African Jewry, is a community of scholars and students engaged in the study of African jewelry and its diverse cultures, historical environments, religious beliefs, and practices. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are a whole community out there talking about us, and we're not engaged. We're not talking about it ourselves. We're just worried about, you know, the Spurs and the, who the people they playing? I can't even think. I'm so outside of, well, I used to be in sports all the time. I can't even think. Oklahoma. Yeah, we're more worried about that and the Knicks than we worried about, you know, all these laws that they're starting to pass against our people, and understanding what that means for us biblically, right? And even who we are here in the society that we live. So next slide. So we, you know, talked about a lot of the Benin. So when they say Dahomey is the same place. When they talking about Kingdom of Judah, Dahomey, Benin, all this is the same. Just like we showed in that video about that city in Suriname that said that little village that they call themselves Dahomey, the Dahomey village in Suriname in South America. So how's that connected to here when we actually saw the stuff about Suriname and how they took some of the black Portuguese and stuff, right? Or the Sephardic Jews that were black and took them to Suriname and kind of erased their history, right? So how's that all connected, right? So that's what we need to be looking at. And next slide, we actually talked about that. So if you haven't seen this video, it's very important because that's what he was talking about, right? Some of the connections and some of the traditions of the Ewe people and how they connect. So that's why we, I think last week I said the sheep, I said Ewe versus ewes. I thank you for somebody who corrected me. But the reason why I say it because, they basically named this tribe Ewe because of a female sheep from what she shared with us, right? So that's the reason why, I see the word, ewes, I automatically say Ewes now because I made that connection. It's just hard to get out of my head now. But, it's important for us to understand their history, why they were called Ewe, right? And how that connects to the Eber and the Ibri people, right? Like all those connections that we're talking about all has some history there. So next, we talked about, my DNA, Benin, right? How it has some part Benin, at least that says 6%. It says my paternal side had it, but then my paternal first cousins and uncles and aunts, they got more of it than I do. So I don't understand, the chart there. But next, and then Ivory Coast, that's what they're talking about. Even Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, this is where a lot of those Portuguese Jews were dropped off in certain places. So next, we talked about this even. This is from the times of Israel, right? Jewish tribes in Africa are connected to Spanish or Portuguese Jews who were expelled in 1492. Many ended up on the west coast of Africa and disappeared, making it entirely possible that they assimilated into local culture while still maintaining Jewish traditions, Parfit pointed out. So Tuda Parfit is the same guy that talked about the Igbo tribes and the Beta Israel tribe, right? So now in this article in the Times of Israel, not on Essence, right? Not on, what's the other black paper? Jet, right? None of our stuff. We're getting none of this information about us. But they're talking about us and all these other places around the world, even in Israel, Times of Israel, talking about, West Africans could be connected and they just accidentally lost, don't know what happened to them. But at the same sense, they can keep track of all these other Sephardic Jewish lines all throughout Puerto Rico and Mexico and everything else. So we know something is going up. It didn't even says the key to accurately using DNA research is finding places where two groups have genetic similarities. So, that's why I say it's so important to look at some of our DNA. And that made me think about, one of the things when we're talking about Benin as well. So next slide, when I actually use, this is called Copilot. I just asked it the question, were there any black Israelites living in Spain and Portugal that may have been connected to the transatlantic slave trade that started in Seville? So Seville, Spain is where we talked about, the line of King David was taken. B'nai Israel talks about that. A lot of people talk about it now too, since he was able to share that information. Ronald Dalton talks about it. There's a lot of different people that talk about it. And this is what AI said. Black Israelites did live in parts of Spain and Portugal, and some of them did become entangled in the early stages of the transatlantic slave trade, especially through Seville, which was one of the first major slave trading ports in Iberia. The key is separating documented history from later interpretations and then connecting the pieces that matter for your question. So next slide. It said black or African origin Jews in Iberia. Multiple historical streams place African and Afro-Jewish populations in Iberia long before 1492. And then medieval writers and later historians describe black Jews, Moorish Jews. So now you see how they call some black Jews Moors. So you got to make sure you make that distinction, right? So there was Moors and there was Moorish Jews. How, you start dividing that. Living in the Iberian Peninsula, connected to North Africa and the Maghreb. So like we showed, one of my friends, Elder Mickey, right? He had some DNA from the Maghreb, here from North Carolina. He had no clue why, right? These communities included Jews from North Africa, Jews of Berber, Moorish, or sub-Saharan ancestry, Jews who migrated with or alongside Muslim populations during the Islamic period. So Muslims came from Arabia, and they merged in with other people, and they kind of moved around Africa together, right? So where did they go? Why some of their books, some of their historians say there was black Israelite communities living in West Africa, and actually could name the royal families and all this other stuff, right? These groups were not marginal. They were part of the diverse Sephardic world. Next slide. So it talks about the expulsion from Iberia is just Spain and Portugal. The movement of black Jews into West Africa. So, these are the different places they were expelled or fled to, right? The Maghreb, Guinea coast. I got a lot of cousins from Guinea that I'm finding in Sudan, in Senegal, but Benin and Senegambia, Cape Verde, Sao Tome, right? And some of the sources describe large numbers of black Jews expelled to West Africa where they merged or formed communities along the Atlantic coast. So if they know this, AI is just going searching the internet. Why don't they know like what communities along the Atlantic coast they were? This matters because West African became the primary source region for the transatlantic slave trade. So next. So Seville as an early slave trade hub. So, Seville was the same place where the descendant of King Judah of Israel, Judas, came. Is the same place, was one of the earliest centers of enslaving Africans, right? They processed enslaved people, issuing license for Portuguese and Spanish. They issue license, so they know what ships and stuff, right? That's coming off for them to actually have a license to enslave people. Shipping enslaved Africans to the New World. So the question is, were any of the Africans enslaved to Seville descended from Iberian Jews? The answer is yes, possibly for two reasons. Jews, including black Jews, were expelled into West Africa, and Portugal deported Jews to Sao Tome and West Africa. So those are the things that we need to start to understand, because it even talks about these expelled or deported Jews once absorbed into African societies became part of the populations targeted by Portuguese and Spanish slavers. Why would AI say that, right? This is Microsoft Copilot. So next slide. So were the black Israelites connected to the slave trade? Putting the evidence together, black or African origin Jews lived in Iberia. Many were expelled or deported to West Africa. West Africa became the primary source of enslaved Africans. Seville was a major early slave trade port. It was where the slave trade started. The same place that King David people descended is the same place the slave trade started. Some were taken to Spain, is the same place. So you start look up Granada and some of the other places, Toledo. Just look at the history of Lisbon and just type in black Jews and see what comes out, right? Some expelled Iberian Jews, including black Jews, were absorbed into West African populations. Their descendants was among enslaved and transported to Americas. These mean some African Americans today may descend from black Israelites who once lived in Spain and Portugal, especially those expelled in West Africa before the slave trade intensified. This conclusion aligns with historical passage documented in the source above, even though individual names cannot be traced. It said it cannot be, but like I said, you can trace the names that's coming out of certain bloodlines that came out of Spain and Portugal during that time. You can trace that, right? All right, so next is after talked about it, I showed this before, it's my DNA. Look at some of the places: Angola, Bermuda, Brazil, Cape Verde, right? Ghana, the Airway people, Ghana, the Khan, that's Nzima, Guinea-Bissau, that's Senegambia, Guyana, that's what we just talked about, right? Suriname, Guyana, all those places. Israel, right? Portugal, Sierra Leone, Spain, and Congo, and so many other places. I hadn't even gotten to the Native American part. So, I always get hit up. People like, what about Native Americans? Native Americans are the people of Israel. There's some truth to that, but you show the same bloodline as everybody else. E1B1A. So how is all that connected, right? So we just get so focused only on certain parts, right? And some of the African tribes that I know, cousins and people, they so tribal, like, oh, we the Israelites, we the only people. And it's like, wait a minute, maybe if we start sharing information and understand we all had different migrations in different places at different times, it makes more sense, right? Instead of fighting against each other all the time, all right? So even Puerto Rico, right, has some of those cousins. So actually, I'm just showing you, this is just one part of some of my research. But next, so these are some of my family's people that I actually found with their last names, right, and how they basically connect, and some of them who have royal connections. So you can see how I'm tracking some of this, right, and what countries they come from, right? Some of them from America, and some of us, all these same people are sharing the same bloodline with me. Right? With each other, some of them. are sharing. I don't put all the stuff out there, but some of them sharing the same connections with one another. And they're in Puerto Rico, African American, Songhai Empire, the Soninke, Native American, Fulani, you know. And remember that these are only the people who are taking the test, who have the money to take the test. So it doesn't mean, you know, Fulani for me, I do have a lot of connections to the Fulani, but that's not my major, you know, DNA. That's just one of the subgroups that I have that I'm able to find people with. So once you understand the Fulani's migrations and, you know, who are the other people, like the Messina, that's another empire that it connect to. So I didn't even know who the Messina people were, but they also are connected to some of these other empires, like the Songhai and the Soninke and the Bambara. So next, so, you know, this is what I talked about, at least in the time we were at the community Shabbat, where, you know, somebody here in North Carolina had in the North Carolina newspaper where this Jewish guy from Russia, he talked about how the Bambaras were Israelites, were Negro Israelites. He called them Jewish Negroes, right, that came to America as well. They got caught up with Gullah Geechee and some of the slavery here in North Carolina, South Carolina, and other places. And then they were talking about on the right side where it talks about how Bambara was brought to South Carolina, Georgia, and the French colony. So if you know about the Huguenots or Huguenots, you know, those are French people that descend from France. They got mixed in with them too. So I got some of those ancestors. So it's like when you start checking some of those boxes, you're like, wait a minute, there's too many similarities, but you got to know what boxes to check. So that's why we show these videos, so you can start, you know, hopefully you're documenting something on yourself or making a connection with your own family, right, lineage. So then you can say, hey, I got this connection, which people have, and thank you for sharing, right? So then I'm like, oh, that's not just me. Where's your family from? And then sometimes that's how you hear me say, hey, cousin, shalom, Shabbat, shalom, cousin. A lot of these cousins I didn't even know I had. So we start waking up. So praise Yah. Some of them close cousins even. So we can see how the Bambara, the Tuareg, and the Fulani people, it said on the side, mixed in together. So even though people say Fulani are not Israelites, it's just, you know, from another part of Middle East, when they came to West Africa, so many mixing happened. So you can even carry the trait, and you can see that my DNA, they say that one of the tribes I could be connected to or share some DNA with is the Bambara tribe. So next, so I'm just showing you how all this connects. You know, he wrote a book, Lorenzo Dow Turner. Did anybody know him? You know his name? No, he wrote a book here from Elizabeth City, North Carolina. He's like the Gullah Geechee, father of Gullah Geechee studies. So there got to be something in there, right? His books that talks about this connection. So next slide, we talked a little bit about this already. I'm just bringing it all back together. But, you know, he talks about how, you know, a lot of those mixed cultures of Senegal, Ivory Coast, including Cape Verde and Sierra Leone, didn't you just see all that on my DNA, right? Such ethnic groups as the Bambara, Fula, Malinka, Songhai, Sera, Mindi, Timni, Kissi, Papal, and Baga utilize their own special techniques to cultivate rice. And Kissi is very important because Kissi, some people say Geechee, like the Gullah Geechee. Geechee and Kissi, they say, are connected. That's where some of the connection of the Gullah Geechee people are here too. So next slide. I already said that one. Next one. So this is why, you know, we might share next couple of weeks. But, you know, I talked about this lady, how she had Portuguese Jewish ancestry mixed in with the Gullah Geechee people. So you can see how all this is connecting, right? Like, this is our history, how we connect all the way back to not just, you know, Israel, but also to West Africa, to Native Americans, to Spain and Portugal, to Caribbeans. All this is important part of our history to connect to Brazil, right? We got some people down in Brazil and South America. All this, and when we share the same bloodline and stories, you know, we should be able to track it all the way back by connecting our different families and DNA together. So next, so that's why she tracked her history, right? And here, this is the video I was thinking about showing next week. Y'all willing? Because I know I showed it a long time ago, but I don't think I've showed it recently. And then next, so this is where I talked about the DNA that switched overnight, right? I used to say mine was Mesoamerican and Andean. That's the Andean, I think that's what you call it, the mountains that go over there. But if you know about the, what's that place in Mexico, right below Mexico, I can't think of it, Belize. Right? So a lot of slaves came to Belize, right? So we got to know about that history because that starts Jamestown history in America. They were taking a lot of our people over to Belize, in that area as part of the slave trade. So to Mexico. So how are we connected to Mexico, right? And then overnight, my DNA switched from Mesoamerican to Portuguese overnight to 4%, right? So why did they do that overnight? So just because I tell people it doesn't show, certain things don't show up in your DNA, it's based upon their algorithms, right? So their algorithm one time saying I was a Mexican, right? Then overnight it says I'm Portuguese. Which one is it, right? So just because ancestry to me I found is not, when it comes to the origins and all that, that's not as good as some of the other ones. So just keep that in mind too. So next, so this is last slide here. This is basically, you know, showing that place where they talked about over in Portugal, Arquivo Histórico Ultramarino. So, you know, right? Some of these people, I actually had this translated, but actually, you know, it's Portuguese. So, you know, use your ChatGPT skills, write you a letter, ask them, hey, you got any documents there? And hey, tell ChatGPT to translate it into Portuguese, copy and paste it the email and send it to them, right? Like if you got some kind of connection to try to find out more about your history and some of the things that's going on. All right, so that's the last slide there. About the culture. So I just want to take time to share that because it's so relevant in what we're studying, and it's hopefully you're starting to make these connections over the last months that I've been sharing this information. Hopefully you're starting to do that connection. And if you're interested in doing being a part, I know I've already done it multiple times, but being a part of the genealogy workshop, you know, put it in the comments, share, you know, so, you know, I just do stuff based on people's interests. I don't like wasting my time, but I want to make sure it's valuable for people. Right, that people that's truly interested is going to take the time to study and to do the stuff that, you know, we need to do to actually be able to show us, our people, who we are. Yes.
It's a comment that's holding, but it says, nobody can see it, but it says, you sure do have faith in the late mainstream history that was written in the language of your white and Arab slave masters.
Okay.
It's all fake, fabricated, and made up. Wake up and free yourself.
Who's that? Who's the person who wrote it?
It's Pharaoh Mizraim.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's the same guy. Yeah, there's a guy that's up there. He's been trying to go back and forth about history and ancient history about Strabo and stuff like that. But you know, a lot of people don't realize that even the Greeks and Romans, right? Like some of the history that some of Egyptology has and some of the stuff that they actually have received is actually from Europeans. So, you know, you have to take what you can. And actually, as we talked about, Egypt, actually, Mizraim had us enslaved, right? Had Israelites enslaved. So all people basically had a part of a different time of slavery. Even, you know, some of the tribes in Africa, their own tribal members enslaved them. So it's just an ideology we have to kind of understand, right? And not be victim of as well from our you know, mental enslavement on certain things as well, right? Like we don't have to try to look at the world in certain ways. The question is, where is some of the information and what leads us to truth? So instead of saying what we shouldn't do, my thing is share what information and resources that you have, right? Like share, like if you got a book or something from West African or Egyptian, you know, especially with the Egyptian time period, you have to be careful because the time of the Greeks that went throughout Egypt too. So if you actually have some information from a black African that didn't enslave our people, let us know. I'll be amazed to see what information that is, and that will actually help us too. All right.
Some people say they're interested in a workshop.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Genealogy.
Thank you. Yeah. So we'll try to do that too. You know, if you write us at the email address that's going, that would be helpful. Just so I can people trying to hack our way of enrolling people, show you that there must be some kind of interest, or like how's all this interest in what we're doing here if people don't truly believe, right? If you don't believe in it, they got like thousands of other YouTube channels, right? But you can see that there must be an interest to some degree where you start having some challenges where people try to persecute you and try to come against you. It's like, especially when I'm not trying not to do anything, right? Don't call people names. Don't, you know, everybody's my people. That's what I say. And we need to grow together instead of fighting so much. All right, we're gonna talk a little bit about that maybe today. I don't want to prolong today's time, but we're going to teach a little bit of the lesson here. So, you know, we're still teaching about the biblical history. So fair use here, that's important. So same fair use disclaimer. But we talking about the kings, right? So we're going to go a little bit more into what happened with Israel to understand how we get to West Africa and help some people understand how some of the tribes in West Africa say they come from Israel as well. So, you know, we want to make sure we listen to our own people, and some people just think that our people in Africa was just, you know, naive or, you know, not intelligent because they had oral history, but they actually passed that oral history from generation to the gritos, or I think that's how you say it, GROITs. I think that's how you say it. But they basically had like musicians, and they basically passed that history on and on and on from generation to generation. So it couldn't be taken by other people too, right? And some people have more confidence in documents that European people wrote or other people wrote, but not confidence in the oral history. When people know their own, like I said, you know your grandma, your great-grandma, your great-great-grandma. Now I know generations and generations, right? So that's actually oral history that I can remember and I can pass down to other people as well, other generations as well. All right, so we had those three kings. The first king was Abimelech, the second was Saul, and the next one was Ishbosheth, right? So those were very important kings. And then we know the next one after that was King David. And then next slide, we can see that there's inscriptions about King David, right? So this is not just some made up fabrications and stories. They have archaeology that's connected to, right? Who the house of King David was and where they were also connected. So we have different inscriptions in different places that talk about King David by name. So this is not just some made up stuff unless people don't believe in archaeology, right? So that's why I mix this in with our lessons also. So next, so we basically got to the Mosaic Covenant and where Solomon basically built the temple. So that's what we've been going through all, last 2 or 3 weeks to get up to this point. We did the Mosaic Covenant, right? Why that covenant was given to our people, and then why Solomon built the temple and all the history that came up. Well, not all of it, but a good part of the history that got us to that point. So this is why it's important to understand history, because some people don't understand the full history of our people, even in the Bible. That's right there, right? So they'll skip over certain things, and, you know, then it's important to connect that back to archaeology as well, all right? And then you can connect it to our DNA, which I took DNA, and, you know, they basically, you know, take Middle Eastern bones and stuff, right? And they extract DNA from there, and my DNA connects to that. It's amazing, really. Me and my cousin from Sudan was talking. We share our DNA and results and stuff because we know we are connected through DNA. And we also, you know, for those of you who are of Africa, you know, it's important. You can say you know what tribe and stuff you're from, which is very you know, which is true. But when you take your DNA, you'll see your migrations and stuff that you didn't know before, and also how you connect to other people too. And when we did one from somebody from Angola, as well as, you know, my cousin from Sudan, they both show ancient American Indian. Like, how do they connect to American Indians? Well, they have no family history of connecting to American Indians because some of them migrated over here, right? And if you look at some of we'll talk about that later. But there are some people that talk about the oldest Americans, Native Americans in America were black people. And this is like, you know, not just like some fringe site. I'll hold it for later. But that's how we'll talk about the Native American and how some of them connect to the Israelites as well. But next slide. So this is important. So this is basically what happened when the tribes start separating, right? And that's important because it goes to the migration and some of the history. But in 1 Kings chapter 11, it says, Then Jeroboam, son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zereda. So it's important, you know, this is northern tribe. Remember I said, you know, the blessing that was given to Joseph, that was given to his younger son, Ephraim, right? And then how he was basically, Joshua came from Ephraim. And then, you know, even his grandparents and some of his were like the prince of Ephraim. And they were the chiefs of Ephraim, which means they were even over 3 other tribes of Benjamin, of Ephraim, and also of Manasseh. So, you know, Ephraim was being built up at this time. And now we can actually see that, Benjamin, which was one of the people under the camp, I call it the camp of Ephraim, with Saul, and then even Abimelech, as we showed before, was under Manasseh, right? And then you had Ishbosheth, who was King Saul's son. They were the first 3 rulers of Israel. And now that the kingdom is now getting divided, we're getting Jeroboam, who is now an Ephraimite, over the whole 10 tribes of Israel. Really, he's over the 10 northern tribes, and this is how he became that way. So it says, Jeroboam, the son of Nebaioth, Ephraimite, was Zerada, Solomon's servants, whose mother name was Zeruiah, a widow, also rebelled against the king. All right. Now this was the reason why he rebelled against the king. Solomon built the Melio, and he closed up the breach of the city of his father David. Now the man Jeroboam was a violent warrior, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he appointed him over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. And it came, so he was over the full house of Joseph, the labor, right? So it shows you how Yah still had a very important place of Ephraim, even during the time of David ruling and Solomon ruling, right? So it came about at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him on the road. Now Ahijah had clothed himself with a new cloak, and both of them were alone in the field. Then Ahijah took hold of the new cloak which was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. He said to Jeroboam, "Take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says Yahuwah, the El of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and give you 10 tribes, but he will have 1 tribe for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel." So remember Solomon, he was given a vision and said, hey, as long as you do right, don't marry no foreign women, love me and treat, and I will bless you, and your name will be, upon, on the royal tribe forever. And we know he married all them foreign women that led people astray. So, a lot of people wanted to talk about what Jeroboam and the northern tribe did, but they overlooked Solomon because he's was the big one that really messed up a lot of the Israelites, right? So then when he messed up, Rehoboam came into his Solomon's son, Rehoboam, was time for him to rule. So this is where we coming from. And then Jeroboam, before that time, was working for King Solomon. And then, Yah is giving him, saying, okay, I'm going to move the kingdom back to Ephraim from Judah, because Judah messed up. So you can see how people keep on messing up back and forth, and it keeps on going back and forth between Ephraim and Judah. All right. So next, so we see in 1 Kings 12, it says, then Rehoboam went to Shechem. So why is Shechem important? Hopefully you know now from all the times we talked about Shechem. So that's where the curses, Deuteronomy 28, blessings and curses was given to the people as they were entering into the land. That's where Dinah was raped and Dana was raped and all the stuff that happened there with Shechem. The person actually was named Shechem. So we talked about all the things that's happened in Shechem. So hopefully you can see that Shechem, Shiloh, Jerusalem, some of these are some very important places to keep in your mind, right? For all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Now when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, he was living in Egypt, for he was yet in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, because King Solomon, fell out of favor with him, and he fled to Egypt. So shows you once again how Israelites lived in Egypt, right? So we would have some mixed blood with Egyptians and things like that too, if we just follow the storyline, because there's no way only a small number of Israelites go to Egypt and come out as millions, right? So we know we mixed in with a lot of Egyptians, and then they, some of the historians saying we look like the Israelites look like Ethiopians. So Ethiopians are black, right? So, it just shows you something was going on during that time. But verse 13, the king answered the people harshly, for he forsook the advice of the elders which they had given him. So, a lot of young adults now think, because you got Chat GPT, you know it all, right? But it's very important that, number one, our elders don't act like youth, right? That's what's happening in today's society. Everybody want to look like a young adult instead of acting their age and, allowing that time for the youth to have their life, right? To do, sometimes they mess up, but who they going to get guidance for? from. And there's so many elders now that's, you know, trying to look, you know, worried more about their looks and stuff than more worried about the generations to come. So we got to make sure we get out of that narcissistic mindset to think about the generations, right? So that's why even in Ezekiel, the elders, you know, Ezekiel was speaking to the elders and rebuking the elders from Yah because they had fallen into many abominations. But, you know, in this part, they were actually giving good advice. And the young adult king said, hey, I don't need your advice. I'm going to, you know, do me, right? And that was the mistake. But it says, then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death. And King Rehoboam made haste to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So he was talking about actually putting more labor on Israelites, right? Because he said, oh, my father was, you know, harsh and stuff, Solomon. I'm going to be even more harsher, right? When his elders said, no, you might want to lay off. And he said, no. So he said, I'm going to be harder on them. He sent his laborer and they killed him. He said, I better get out of town. So verse 21, it says, now when Rehoboam had come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. So these are the two tribes. Remember, he ripped it was ripped in 12 pieces. 10 of the pieces Jeroboam kept, and 2 of them was left. So Judah and Benjamin was still left with Rehoboam, right? 180,000 chosen men who were warriors to fight against the house of Israel to restore the kingdom to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. So Rehoboam, after he fled, he was like, look, we're going to go and fight and get our land back, all right? Get our kingdom back, not just land, all right? So next. So this is what Jeroboam did, though. So he basically said in his heart, so he was worried about his people going to the southern tribe. And, you know, even though he owned the northern, the majority, he owned 10. And Yah told him he will be blessed with the 10, right? That Yah basically, you know, anointed him to be king, right? He's the one selected him. But he said in his own heart that he was more worried about losing his kingdom because of the mindset of the people. So what he ended up doing, because the temple was still in the southern part at this time. Remember we talked about the traveling of the temple and actually how it came to in the town of, in the place of the Judeans, the southern tribe. So he was worried about the people going down there and having to do all that, and then they'll get confused, you know, start making alliances with the southern tribe and may try to overrule him. So this is all the stuff that he did. So it says, verse 28, so the king consulted and he consulted. Who did he consult with, right? So that's interesting. And made 2 golden calves. And he said to them, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. He didn't just go say, hey, these are some golden calves. He went back to the same golden calves that Moses rebuked the Israelites for. So he went all the way back to that time to bring the same gods, false gods, idol gods, back into the land because his own desires, right? He wanted to manipulate people for his own worth, right? So he says he set one up in Bethel and the other one he put in Dan, and that's important, Bethel and Dan, all right? So now this thing became a sin for the people who went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And he made houses on the high places and made priests from all the people who were not of the sons of Levi. So he made his own priests. He said, Levi, you know, it's supposed to only come. Yah said, come. He said, no, I'm going to come with our own people. So he just chose people who would be loyal to him. You hear that a lot in different worlds, you know, even in Christian churches or maybe even the Israelite. I guess we haven't got too far in the Israelite assemblies to see. But a lot of times they, you know, favor their own children, not the person that's more fit. They might fit a child that might be doing wrong, be smoking, drinking, cheating on women, and they'd be like, oh, make him the next pastor, right? Because they want to put him in place, put that person in place, even though they're not, maybe at that time, maybe later they might become right, but, you know, at the time they be putting them in there, they won't be right. But then it says in 32, Jeroboam instituted a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like the feast which is in Judah. And he went up to the altar. So what feast is in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month? I don't know any feast, but it says like the feast, right? So keep that in mind. And he went up to the altar, thus he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves which he had made. And he stationed in Bethel the priest of the high places which he made. Then he went up to the altar which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart. And he instituted a feast for the sons of Israel and went up to the altar to burn incense. So he basically made a dedication, kind of like what, you know, certain presidents are doing and naming their stuff, putting their name on all kind of stuff and trying to have like, hey, I'm the king over you, you're going to listen to me, right, kind of stuff. So that's what he was doing, right? He was saying, hey, I made up a whole new religion. This is the thing you're going to do, and we're going to dedicate this to this time, you know, this paganism, and we're all going to be connected to it. So you can see how the northern tribe really had messed up. All right, so what feast was it that's very connected, closely connected to the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, right? It says like the feast. It didn't say exactly. So next, so we can see that Sukkot, right, was on the is on the 15th of the 7th month, is the Feast of Booths or Sukkot for 7 days. So we can see the type of things that he was doing. He was basically replacing priests and he was replacing feast days to what was of his best interest, right? So going back to those same old sins of idol worship, you know, and that's Egyptian worship, right? So that's what they were doing in Mizraim, right? They were basically taking, what's his name? Apis? I can't think of the cow god, but the, you know, taking that same one and the same thing the Europeans did later, right? So that's how they, Seraphis, is it Seraphis? Yeah, Seraphis Christos, yes. So they basically took that same cow god and they basically mixed in other gods, Egyptian gods, and they gave it a face, and that's how they were worshiping later on in time. But, you know, here they're taking the same Egyptian gods and they were basically doing the same thing, right? You know, to set worship and, you know, dedicating themselves to those gods instead of Yah. So that's what keeps on happening, is that our heart continues to go back to doing the things that we want to do to fit our life, right? When Yah is trying to call us out to make us his people. And then we create substitutes for the things of Yah, and that ends up hurting us, right? So next slide. So this is what we talk about a lot during Passover, right? Like, we know that a lot of these things are not in the Bible, but yet we can see our people are so connected to it through, you know, Western Christianity at that, that, you know, that a lot of these things are still done in Ukraine to the sun gods, right? Idols, Easter eggs, that's actually a thing in Ukraine. This is not even Easter as in a Christian. This is a pagan Easter festival. And you can see them praying to the sun god, a sun disk. They got leavened bread instead of unleavened bread that was supposed to be for Passover, doing everything opposite. And we're trying to gravitate to cultures that's not ours, all right? So next. So Rehoboam then, during that time where all this paganism is going on, right? People's hearts are no longer being dedicated. They're going astray. So Rehoboam this is when it talks about he was going to go fight, right? So in the 2 Corinthians Chronicles chapter 11, it talks about how he was going to go get an army, assemble Judah and Benjamin and go fight against Rehoboam. But then a prophet came and it said from Yah, and he said in verse 4, thus says Yahuwah, you shall not go up to fight against your relatives. Return every man to his house, for this thing is from me. So they listened to the words of Yahuwah and returned from going against Jeroboam. So it just shows you how, you know, Yah doesn't want our people to fight. You know, the stuff that we get on ourselves sometimes, you know, he allows us to afflict because we continue to go astray from him. But we shouldn't be fighting against each other, right? It's just going to make us weaker as a people. The thing is, we should be repenting and turning to him. So that's the reason why I don't, you know, anymore. Back in the day, I used to debate with people left and right. But now I'm like, you know, people either want it or not. It's a remnant, right? Like, hey, if you good with, you know, wanted to do whatever false god worship or your connection and you want to try to justify who you are, cool, do it. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve Yahuwah, right? But then you can even see where it talks about Rehoboam lived in Jerusalem, built up different cities for defense. And one of them is Lachish. So maybe my wife can show her that screen that has the people of Judah. But, you know, a lot of people show this relief a lot. And it basically shows when the king of Assyria went to Israel and he took over the northern tribe. Oh, no, the screen that you got right there. And basically he took them as slaves. So this is actually, you know, the city that Rehoboam built, But later on, yeah, it's going to be taken, and these are what the people look like. You know, the Israelites look like that was taken from that city, Lachish. This is actually that city that you're talking about, right? It's archaeology. You can see them with woolly hair. You see them with woolly beards, right? The noses, broad noses, but you can see the people behind them, even though those are his cousins, you see them with longer hair, but you know, even they are, Assyrians are actually connected to the Israelites as well. But you can just see how you know, this time, right? I think we said the test of time one time was one of the subjects, but you can see how this stuff is being preserved in archaeology. It's not just stuff that we're just making up randomly. Connects to our DNA and everything else, right? So going back to the lesson, it says, he also strengthened the forces and put officers in them and stores for food, oil, and wine. He put shields and spears in every city and strengthened them greatly. So he held Judah and Benjamin. Moreover, the priests and the Levites who were in all Israel stood with him from all their districts. For the Levites left their pasture lands and their property and came to Judah and Jerusalem, for Jeroboam and his sons had excluded them from serving as priests to Yahuwah. So what does this mean? Thank you. I can't remember his name, but this is actually somebody helped me out, you know, here recently. He shared this scripture with me and showed me, and I never really focused on this scripture. But basically the Levites and the priests that was remember the Levites, when they first came into the promised land, they were the ones that was giving, you know, territory among the other 12 tribes, because if you really count, there's 13 tribes. Since Joseph was split into two, Ephraim, Manasseh, right? Then you have Levite, that's 13. But Levites were not given that land, given a territory, right? They had to live among the other Israelites to kind of guide them spiritually. So the ones that were in the northern territories and all the other 10 tribes outside of Judah and Benjamin, that was under Jeroboam's rule, Jeroboam basically, you know, like it said, made his own priests and excluded them. So they said, hey, we're going to go to Rehoboam. So they all defaulted and went down to the southern kingdom of Judea and lived with them for a while. And then it keeps on reading. That's very important, how we interpret that. And I'm still still trying to process that even now. So thank you, Ak. I wish I remember his name, Ak, for sharing that in the comments. I'll be listening to the comments too. So it says in 15, he set up priests of his own for the high places, for the satars and for the calves which he had made. Those from all the tribes of Israel who set their hearts on seeking Yahuwah of Israel followed them to Jerusalem to sacrifice to Yahuwah of their fathers. So, you know, even the other tribes who were truly had a true heart for Yah, they actually left and still went down to Jerusalem to do the sacrifices, right? To do the things that they were supposed to do. So now you can see the same thing even within us. I always like to bring it into today because, you know, Yah is separating us, right? Kodesh, to separate us. Holy, that's what holiness is, to separate. He's setting us apart for his purpose. That's what he's doing now. And then some people are not coming, right? They still want to do the pagan stuff no matter what kind of paganism it is. I just don't talk about, we just know mostly here in the West about Christianity paganism, but a lot of some Judaism, right, has paganism, got Babylonian paganism in it, right? And some people still trying to gravitate and hold on to those things or trying to assimilate to those things too. But Yah's trying to pull us all out to be the true people that he's called us to do and follow that ancient path, right? We talked about that to the highway to Zion, right? That was that lesson that I taught about, you know, we have to get our hearts, we got to separate, that he said he's going to create a highway, you know, to Jerusalem, coming from Assyria and also coming from Egypt again, right? That we're going to do similar what we did before of coming out of Egypt and going back to Israel. So it says, verse 17, they strengthened the kingdom of Judah and supported Jeroboam, the son of Solomon, for 3 years, for they walked in the way of David and Solomon for 3 years. So, and that's the part that I'm trying to understand more, because like after the 3 years happened, what does that mean? Did they go back to the northern tribe? Did they stay where they are? What happened after that time? So, hey, put in the comments, especially in the comments, you know, in the full video, not just in the thread, but put in both places if you got any ideas or any scripture of what happened after those 3 years to the northern tribe people that was, you know, the remnant. We can see later on, even in the book of Hezekiah, where Hezekiah is writing letters. I think we covered that. I don't know if it's in Bible study or here. When he was trying to reinstitute the Passover, and he was writing letters to people in the northern tribe saying, come to the, you know, that still was there, even after the Assyrian king had came and start taking the people out of Israel, the 12 tribes, and replacing them with the Samaritans, but it still said there was a remnant of them that was still there that he was trying to get them to come and be a part of the Passover, which we will cover later, y'all willing. So next. So this is also important because, think about it, this is Rehoboam. Rehoboam has some what they call black blood in him, right? So they try to teach about, I don't think I taught it publicly yet, but I know I've taught it in the past about the Hamite curse. Really, they tried to change the curse of Ham and try to put it on Shemites. There's actually a part in history when they talk about the king of Italy tried to take the curse that was given to Canaan, but they made it the curse of Ham, and from there they tried to use that to justify slavery. But when they did that, right, they're basically saying that Ham were black Africans, right? That's what some people need to kind of get out of their mind, that Ham is just Africa, right? Some people should say Ham, they automatically say Africa. I ain't African, a lot of people be saying. I'm like, oh man, they just, they'll fight over about being African, don't want to be, I'm not connected to them West Africans, and I'm like, all Africans are not the same. Africa is the most diverse genetically of anywhere in the world. So you got people that got mixed in, and even, everybody from the world are from Africa. Everybody. If you believe in Adam and Eve connection. Now, if you just think people just popped up out of the ground around the world, then that's different. I don't know. I don't think I'll touch that. That there is a polygenesis. Things like you just different people popped up out of the ground, out of the water or something, all around the earth, even though they all looked alike, but it's very racist. They try to say that that's the reason why you got black people and different colors of people. But we all really came from the same two people. And scientists actually even prove that from a secular sense too, right? So if you believe that, then, we know that even with Ham, right? Ham had Nimrod. Nimrod actually ruled what they call today the Middle East, not even Africa. He was Middle East. He was a descendant of Cush. Cush means black, right? So Nimrod is a Middle Eastern. So for those that just got the mindset saying Africa is just Ham, Ham is all throughout different places, right? We can even talk about the children of the Canaanites, right? The Canaanites were the land of, I know people talking about the book of Jubilees, talking about how he didn't get out the right territory. He didn't go all the way. He took Sham's territory, but he still lived there, right? And descendants were there. So when you talk about the Hittites and all them, those are Hamites, right? And there's no way that, current people in modern scientists and history, they're racist. So they'll try to tell you that Canaan is not black, that he's Caucasian and stuff. Like, wait a minute. Canaan is black, but then they'll tell us that we Cushites. But they're brothers. Like, how can you say, well, it just don't even make sense. They just straight up lying about history now. And it's easy to see if you know the Bible, right? But they made up that theology about the Hamite curse. So let's say, okay, if we say we curse people and we the curse of Ham or Canaan, right? If that's true, then that means that, what does that mean for the Bible, right? Because the Hamites mixed in with, especially Judah, a lot with Judah, but even some of the other Israelites. So we can see in verse 18 here in 2 Chronicles chapter 11, same chapter, it says, then Rehoboam took as wife Mahalath, the daughter of Jeremoth, the son of David. So, Judah still married within Judah, right? Of Abihail, the daughter of Eliab, the son of Jesse. So still the descendant of Jesse. Abigail mixed in with King David, and they had this daughter, and now Rehoboam is marrying his cousin, right? Basically, that's what's happening. All right. And it says, and she bore him these sons. And then verse 20, and after he took Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, and she bore him Abijah, right? Abijah is the next king, right? So, but Abijah came from Absalom's daughter, Maacah. However you want to say it, Maacah, right? So, and then verse 21, so another cousin he marries his brother, Rehoboam was brother to Absalom, right? So he married his daughter. So he married his cousin. So verse 21, Rehoboam loved Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, more than all his other wives and concubines. And he had taken 18 wives and 60 concubines and fathered 28 sons and 60 daughters.
So our bloodline is all out. There's a lot, that's just one king. Just think about Solomon and all the other. There's a lot of Judahites, you could say, all around the world that's from the royal line, right? So it says, verse 22, Rehoboam appointed Abijah the son of Maacah as head and leader among his brothers, for he intended to make him king. He acted wisely and distributed some of the sons throughout all the territories of Judah and Benjamin to all the fortified cities. And he gave them food in abundance, and he sought many wives for them. So they even got many wives. So it's very important to understand, even right here, right, that, you know, a lot of people talking about how foolish Rehoboam was with not listening to the elders at first, but it looked like he listened later on. Because now he's making wise decisions, where before he was making foolish decisions. So a lot of people don't talk about the ending, they just talk about the beginning. But it's important to see that he married Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, when we're talking about the different bloodlines, right? So next slide. This is how we also know she's black, right? That descendants of Israel were also black, because Maacah was also Absalom's mother's name. It was his daughter and his mother's name. And we can see King David married Maacah, right? And it says, the first scripture says, but the sons of Israel did not dispossess the Gershacites or the Makahites. How do you say that? Makahites. For Gersher and Makahath lived among Israel until this day. So this is in Joshua, saying that they were still living among Israel, these Canaanite tribes that didn't get kicked out. So if you go to 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 3, and says, these are the sons of King David, right? And I'm just getting down to you can see Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. And third, you can see Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmi, the king of Geshur. So the king of Geshur was a Canaanite. So David's wife was a Canaanite. It's easy to see that, right? If you just look at the scriptures. So if his wife is a Canaanite, so it shows you that the bloodline, some people say you have to be Israelite by the father and mother, but how so if Absalom's father is the king of Geshur? And people say, oh no, that's not, the Israelites, right? That the Israelites took over that land and they became the Gershurites. So how do they have another king if they were Israelites? You had two kings? That don't make sense. So we got to kind of think logically too. So we know that was a Canaanite. And then later on in 1 Chronicles chapter 3, it says in verse 2, that's where we see, it says the third was Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. So we can see again, that makes that connection, right, with Maacah and the king of Geshur, Gershurite, that Absalom was Absalom's mother. We know that he fled, right, 2 Samuel 13, when he was going against King David, that he fled King David, right? And when he fled King David, he tried to, take over the, talk to his father, his grandfather, who was a Gershurite, and he was basically protected there for a while. And then when he came back, he tried to take over the kingdom from King David and all that big story. But we can see what we just finished reading in 2 Chronicles chapter 11. It says, after her, he took Maacah, talking about Rehoboam. We can say basically after her, Rehoboam took Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, and she bore him Abijah, right? And that's when it says that he loved Maacah more than the daughter, loved Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, more than all his other wives and concubines. So you can see that that's black blood going from generation to generation, getting mixed in, right? So you will have a mixed line of blood as well. Yes, somebody had a question?
Yeah, were the Maacathites lineage named after the female Maacah?
No, I don't think so. The Maacathites was actually different. They had the Gershacites, right? And Maacah was actually from the Gershacites, not from Maacathites. I'm not sure about the Maacathites, so if you got some knowledge about them, let me know. But, her name, her descendants, her lineage comes from Geshur, from the king of Geshur. So there was two different tribes that didn't get kicked out of the land of Israel when the Israelites came and took it over from the Canaanites. So it was more than that, really. But we know that the Gershacites and the Maacalites, I don't know how you say that, Maacahites, they were the two Canaanite tribes that were not kicked out. It's just the story continues with the Gershacites later. Hopefully that answers your question. Good question, though, because they probably were related, and it might have had some kind of connection back to that name, too. So if you find something, let us know. But Maacah was the descendant of the Gershishites. Maybe those kingdoms might have even came together later on. I don't know. I don't know what the history of that. Please share if you know anything about that. And that might be a good thing for me to also research. So thank you. Appreciate that. All right, so we can see there, these are how the two kingdoms basically got divided, right? You got Jeroboam at the top, and you got Rehoboam at the bottom. Jeroboam is northern tribe with 10 different tribes under his rule. And then you have the southern tribe of Judah with Judah and Benjamin. And you have you had Levites scattered around. Question is, what happened to the Levites and the priests that was in the northern kingdom? It said 3 years, so I don't know what happened at the 3 years. But it sounded like a lot of them actually went down south for a while. The question is, how long? So if you know that, please put it in the chat as well. All right, so next. So this is why it's important, right? Because future prophecy, right? So we know they got divided in the past, but future prophecy says that we're coming back together. So this is that dry bone thing, right? A lot of people talking about the dry bones and 2 sticks and stuff. So Ezekiel 37:16 says, "And you, son of man, take for yourself 1 stick and write it for Judah and for the sons of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph." So you got Judah and Joseph, Judah and Ephraim, because Ephraim was the one that was supposed to lead Joseph. Joseph doesn't have a tribe, right? By itself, by his name. So it's Ephraim, tribe of Ephraim. It says it right there, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel, his companions. So really, when you say Israel, a lot of time in the Tanakh, or what people call the Old Testament, sometimes it's talking about Israel as in all the tribes. Sometimes it's talking about Israel as in the northern tribe, because the northern tribe had most of the tribes included. Judah, the southern tribe, was only 2 tribes, right? So sometimes it says Israel is talking about the northern tribe in prophecy. Sometimes it says Israel is talking about all the tribes, all 13, I should say, tribes, right? But this is talking about the northern tribe being Israel, the house of Israel. And it says, "Then join them for yourselves one to another into 1 stick, that they might become one in your hand. When the sons of your people speak to you, saying, will you not declare to us what you mean by these? Say to them, thus says Yahuwah, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribe of Israel, his companions, and I will put them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them 1 stick, and they will be one in my hand. The stick on which you write will be in your hand before their eyes. Say to them, thus says Yahuwah, behold, I will take the sons of Israel from among the nations where they have gone, and I will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land, and I will make them 1 nation in the land, and on the mountains of Israel, goes back to the mountains again, and 1 king will be king for all of them, and they will no longer be 2 nations and no longer be divided into 2 kingdoms. So this is future prophecy. So, you can see why that future prophecy, when you start making connections back to past situation, history, to the future, is very important. So this is not just knowledge just to give you. We go through this history so you can actually better interpret future prophecy too, right? So you got to know what was going on during that time, all right? So next. So we can see then later on, I'm going to go a little bit through this, and then we'll stop, before we get to some of the other kings. So we can see in 1 Kings 12, this is what Jeroboam did, right? He's spreading his evil. He's doing his own thing. So he said in verse 25, then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim. So he's moving, he got Shechem. He's building up the city in Ephraim and lived there. So that was the capital of the northern kingdom, right? So that's important later on. Shechem, keep on hearing Shechem, Shechem, Shechem. So start remembering that when you start doing, do a search through the Bible for Shechem. Look at the number of places that's connected. And it says, and he went out from there and built Penuel. All right. Then in Acts 7:16, it says, and from there they were removed to Shechem and laid in the tomb which Abraham had purchased for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. So we know that Abraham actually that's where a lot of our ancestors especially our major patriarchs and some matriarchs as well, was laid in that same area in Shechem. So it'd be interesting to go and do some, we need some of our own Israelite archaeologists. Some of y'all raise your children up to be archaeologists and send our own people over there so we can at least know what's going on, right? In those areas, because they got stuff, it'd be amazing if you got to, if you see what they talk about and stuff that's not in mainstream and some of those little books and stuff, they got a lot of amazing stuff over there. And like I said, they dug up some of the bones in that area and those areas too. And you can see that we have some connection to them. So, maybe the whole plan is rigged, but DNA is even showing some of our connections there as well. All right. So next slide. So this is important because, like it was said earlier, it was talking about the different places that he was basically, where he was building the golden calf, right? So the same place in Dan is important because in Dan, he basically, he put the golden calf, one of the golden calves there. And the other place, he put it in Bethel. So why, is the place in Dan important as well, right? So we'll start seeing a little bit that too. So let's see the next slide. So who was Micah and who built in this place? Who built in this place? I should have had another question mark. I think some of these slides I was doing in the car on the way to speak places. So sometimes you'll see some spelling there because I was in the car trying to hurry up while one of my aunts or my wife was driving. Aunt Mickey used to drive me everywhere when I first started speaking, and I stay up all night to about 3 o'clock in the morning. Still used to, just until a couple of months ago. I should say I'm not going to do that anymore. But you'll see me in my video. I think the one I put out Friday, it looked like I'm sleepy and stuff. That's the reason why. So, I thank y'all for allowing me to get to seek and research and for people to share, but forgive some of the typos. Please have some understanding. Sometimes people get caught up on some of the smaller things. So let's talk a little bit about Micah. All right. So it says, now there was a man of the hill country of Ephraim, once again, whose name was Micah, right? And he said to his mother, the 1,100 pieces of silver which was taken from you, about which you uttered a curse in my hearing, behold, the silver is with me. I took it. And his mother said, blessed be my son Abba Yahuwah. So the whole story, I didn't go into some of the story here, it's just for time, but basically woman lost some money and found out her son robbed her. So she cursed him and he's like, oh, he got kind of scared. He's like, oh, Mom, go tell the truth, right? But he's trying to make it right. We'll talk a little bit about it later. But he basically gave Mama back his money after stealing from him. So show you what kind of person he was, right? But he was scared of Yah. He was scared of them curses. You see people like that now too. But verse 3, it says, and he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. His mother said, I will wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to Yahuwah for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Therefore I will return them to you. So his mom was so happy that her son returned the silver to her that she made a golden image after praising Yah for returning her money. So that's all, that's how people be working. What's that, astrology? Graven image. Uses astrology. They be talking about the Cancer and Capricorn astronomy. So, whatever that is, they talking about, that's how our people are. They be like, oh, I'm an Israelite or I'm a Christian. They be talking about I'm a Taurus, I'm a Scorpio. And, I'm like, how are you mixed up with that? That's not right. You should be mixed up with that. That's false God. That's pagan stuff. Stay away from that stuff, right? But that's how our people are. We all this syncretism type of stuff. And we'll see it later on too, even at the end of the demise of the northern tribe. But in verse 5, it says, and the man Micah had a shrine. He made an ephod and a household idol and household idols, and consecrated one of his sons that he might become his priest. So now this man, I think he's an Ephraimite. He could be. It says the hill country of Ephraim. I guess he could be a Levite, but it says the hill country of Ephraim, right? So he start making more golden idol images in the whole household. He made a whole household. He got his own sons to be priests. Now we know that's a problem, right? So this is even before Jeroboam. All this is before Jeroboam. So they're already doing this idolatry, right, in the hill countries of Ephraim. And it says in verse 6, in those days there were no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in their own eyes. We can see how that is even today. People just say, hey, at least when I was in Christianity, people like, oh, you got the Spirit, y'all, well, God, they said, is going to show you what's right through the Holy Spirit, right? Like, but then you have all these different interpretations of what was right and what was wrong through different people's eyes. Some people think it was okay to fornicate, that God's, what they would say, God's grace will cover you, right? If you go to a party and it's okay to do that, right? Everybody had his own interpretation, did things that was right in their own eyes still today. Right, but we know that that's the reason why Yah has his laws, commandments, and laws, right? He wants us to do what he wants us to do and not what we see that's right in our own eyes. So even now, we got to be careful with that, right? Because we can start a whole new religion by doing things that's right in our own eyes versus what Yah has called us to do. Right. So that's why I'm big on going against some of those things that's not in the Bible, like, the cedar plates and stuff. That's not in the Bible. We got to look at some of that history, right? Some of the stuff that we basically, the Star of David and stuff that's not in the Bible, right? Like where we got to make sure we understand where these things come from. And sometimes we gravitate to, some of the cultures of West Africa. Where West Africans will tell you that's pagan, right? So we got to make sure we do what Yah is calling us all to do and not doing what's right in our own eyes. But anyway, it says in verse 7, now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah of the family of Judah who was a Levite. So this is a Levite that's living among Judah, right? So like I said, there's 12 tribes. Everybody had their own Levite. So sometimes people get that mixed up with Yahusha as well, because Elizabeth was a Levite, and then they were like, oh well, Mary. Well, some people say she was a Levite, and then Mary is Judah. How can that happen? It just shows you they were mixing there as well. But he was staying there. In verse 8, then the man departed from the city from Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he might find a place. And as he made his journey, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. Micah then said to him, dwell with me and be a father and priest to me. So he must have got rid of his sons. Say, hey, y'all rejects. I just made y'all up. I'm going to pick up a new guy. I'm going to upgrade and get me at least a Levite. It didn't even say he was a priest. He was just a Levite, right? Because the priest had to come from Aaron. And that didn't say nothing about Aaron, but he was a Levite. And he said, oh, hey, man, I'll be a priest to me. And I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, a suit of clothes, and your maintenance. So the Levite went in like, oh, yeah, great deal. And the Levite agreed to live with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. So basically he was a hired, minister, you could say. Hey, whoever gives me the most money, I'm going to go and be a shepherd over them. All right, so next. So we see in Judges 18, it says, in those days there was no king. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for themselves to live in, for until that day, an inheritance had not been allotted to them as a possession among the tribes of Israel. So they didn't get their cut of the land yet, right? They got it, but they hadn't won it over. So they still walking around aimlessly like nomads, right? The Danites. But it says in verse 11, skipping down to verse 11, it says, then from the family of the Danites, from Zohar and from Ashtaroth, 600 men armed with weapons with weapons of war set out. So they went out trying to, hey, we need to go find some land. And, the Danites must didn't play around because people were scared of them, right? And it's interesting because like we just heard about Dahomey, right? Some people say Dahomey is home of the Danites, right? So connects back to a lot of this history. If you look up like the Kisi tribe, like we said, Gullah Geechee, Kisi, right? They are connected and relatives of the Da tribe. The Da tribe is called Yakoba, Jacob. That's in today's modern days. They say they're the Danites over in Liberia. So, all this stuff is important to connect back to our people. But then it says, verse 13, they passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. All right, so they coming up there. And early in the story, it said they had already been there one time, but they're on their way back. But verse 17 says, now the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up and entered there and took the graven image and the ephod and the household idols and the molten images, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with 600 men armed with weapons of war. So they start taking these gods these false gods, the Danites. So it's not just Ephraim or the Levites of Ephraim, one or the other, right? This is way before Jeroboam, right? It's Ephraim, you got a Levite from Judah, and now you got the Danites all worshiping false gods, right? Idols and stuff, right? So you can see why when we get to the story of Jeroboam, Rehoboam, you already see they're already messed up, right? So in verse 18 it says, when these went into Micah's house and took the graven image, the ephod, and the household idols, and the molten image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? They said to him, be silent. Put your hand over your mouth and come with us and be to us a father and a priest. So this same false priest is going around being priest now. And look what he says. Let me see. Oh, is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man or to be a priest to a tribe and a family of Israel? So now he upgraded. Now the priest upgrading, right? Michael upgraded from his sons to this Levite Judah. Now the Danites saying, hey, upgrade again and come to be over a whole tribe. And it said in verse 20, the priest's heart was glad. He was shady. It says he took the ephod and the household idols and the graven image and went among the people. First he's like, hey, don't touch it, God. This is my the person I'm trying to help, God. The person that bought me, right? And now he's like, wait a minute. Oh, you got a good deal. Let me go and take his gods and go with you. Like, shady people. So verse 26, it says, so the sons of Dan went on their way. When Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Then they took what Micah had made and the priests who had belonged to him and came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the city with fire. They called, later on 29, they called the name of the city Dan, and the name of Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish, which means lion, I guess. And it says the sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh. That's questionable. I got a question mark there. He and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites into the day of the captivity of the land. So when the northern tribe, until the northern tribe got taken away, the sons of Gershom were the priests of the Danites. All right. So a lot of times people trying to say, oh, the Danites, they cursed people. But this is the only story I can at least find where the Danites really did something terrible. Now the Benjamites, they did something super terrible compared to the Danites. You can see that Judah's part of this, right? That Ephraim's part of this. So I was just trying to figure out where people get that, thing about the Danites. If you know, put it in the chat, right? But it says verse 31, so they set up themselves Micah's graven image, which he had made. All that time, the house of Yah was at Shiloh, showing you that Shiloh was still where the house of Yah was among Ephraim when they first came out of the desert with the tabernacle. It was at Shiloh, what we keep on talking about, right? Then it moved in those different places we talked about last week, and until Solomon made the temple, and then they put the tabernacle of Moses, or tabernacle of David, however you want to, the tent of David, put it in the temple, right? The first temple. All right. So who is Gershom? That's important, right? So that's why I put the question marks behind that. But also the land of Dan, don't lose sight of that. The land of Dan, they basically took that over from, some people say a Phoenician, like up towards Libya, right? They were basically attacking them and taking over that land up to the north. So that's why sometimes they'll say all the way into Dan, right? We talked about that in Bible study. It's just basically showing you that Dan was at the very top of Israel, or close to the very top of Israel where the land started. So anytime you see a reference to Dan, they're basically saying all of Israel from the north to the south, right? That's the northern part of the land of Israel was that Dan city. And this is where they basically building these gods. So that's the same place that Jeroboam now comes with that golden calf, and he sets up his golden calf in this same idol place that was established well before he was even born, right? So we can see that same thing happen among our people, that mixed religion, that syncretism to other false gods and pagan practices when Yah is trying to separate us. He tries to set us apart, and we keep on going back down that line, all right? But the part about the Gershom, so let's go to the next slide. So we can see there's a Gershom, right? But we can see here that that Moses had a wife, Zipporah, right? And she was a Cushite. We're not talking about that. But Moses' son, through Zipporah, he had 2 sons. One was Gershom, right? The same name. And the other one was Eleazar. So who's this Gershom, right? Like, is that the same Gershom they were talking about? Because they had just got to the land, right? Just coming out the desert, coming with Joshua into the land. So a Gershom would have been a Levite, right? That would have been in that land. If you know about, the division of the different people, even among the tabernacle as they was going through the land, Judah was on the right side, and it was actually had a protection over a certain priest. So it'd be good to, Bible study to kind of search through to see if there's a connection there. But let's go to the next slide. So if you read certain, this is why I say it's good to read all kind of Bibles. I'm not, you get focused on certain Bibles. So was the person a son of Manasseh, which says it in the King James, New King James, NASB, Young Literal Translation? I think that's why YLT is, or the Web, right? They all say Manasseh. But in the NASB, if you click on the note, it says some ancient versions read Moses, right? So if you go down to the bottom, you can see in the NLT, NIV, ESV, and all the other translations, it says that the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. So a son of Moses was the one that actually helped the northern tribe to go astray based on the ancient texts and some versions of the Bible. From what I read, some people believe it was an intentional scribal error that they didn't want to credit Moses' descendants being connected to this heinous, idolatrous practice. So they changed it to Manasseh. Look at the history, but that's the reason why I say it's important, because we use NASB. So that's the reason why I like looking at the footnotes as well. But the NASB is supposed to be the most literal translation that's in existence. Maybe ESV now, I'm not sure. Sorry. So we can see that, it's important to understand. This is why we need to read Hebrew. And then even the Hebrew versions you got to be careful with when it comes to the Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scroll, and the, Dead Sea Scrolls is just fragments too. And then you have the full version of the ancient text is in Greek, right? That's the Septuagint. And then anytime you translate a language, it's like, it's kind of like you're already translating the text too, the thought of it too, because you got to put it in another person's mindset that doesn't speak that language. It's like we read it in English. We miss stuff, idioms and little riddles, and we don't realize it's a riddle because we're not understanding the language. So just want to pull that out. So this is a descendant of Moses that's now could possibly be, I think it is, that's a descendant basically who is a priest to the Danites, right? The family line, not him, but his family line is a priest to the Danites in idolatry, right? So that's something, right? All right, and to end it for today, next slide, this is what I just threw in there when I was talking, but this is my DNA, right? So this is from a DNA thing in Israel, right? And they say that they basically did the connection to the archaeology site. So from what they say, now there's some fudging here too, but what they say is that my connection to one of the DNA sites that they say is connected to the Levites is 13%. I share 13% of that connection to that archaeology site. And then the one for Judah, I connect to 20%, right? And this is the one they got from Bethlehem. So, where the bottom ones are the ones that, based on their estimate, across all their estimates, they say now it's really, 6% and 10%. That says 29. Okay, I can't see from here, even with my glasses. But what they doing now is they're taking different archaeology sites, and then they'll try to cross, and they'll say that one archaeology site has more than the next, which doesn't make sense to me, because if all of them are Levi, why would I be less or more based upon the archaeology dig, right? So it's interesting. And then they actually tried to say that, the guy who did this, you can see Pastor Kelly Richardson, we woke now, maybe I don't know if people want me to share certain videos, so I'm kind of hesitant with certain people because I don't want no problems from people. But he has a thing where he actually interviews and he talks to the person who made this site, and he basically calls them out, which was interesting. How, people in our own community is very intelligent. And, even, going back and forth with some of the people they call doctors and finding some of the issues and some of the stuff that's actually skewed to fit certain people, even though our presence is now, but it shows you our presence is in Israel. So if you looked at that conversation with Pastor Fred Price Jr., and I don't know the other guy, I know he's some big YouTuber that everybody's talking about now. This is the same test that Fred Price Jr. took, right? So his DNA also connected, and I think he's even more percentage in certain ones. He has more tribes he's connected to, but he's only to my DNA connected to the last time I checked. And some people said it was even higher when they first started, and then when more African Americans and black people, even some of the tribes over in the Limba tribe that I talked with, they even took, not the Limba in Zimbabwe, another group of Limba, they took this test too. So that's how I was able to connect with them. And, it just shows you how our people through DNA, history, archaeology, it's more than just looking at ancient Greek historians when it connects back to our bloodline, right? We got to look at multiple areas, not just take what one person might say 1,000 years ago, right? Because there's more tribes that's here today that we can connect to that know their own history and how they migrated to West Africa or wherever they are in the world today. All right. Do we got any questions? No more? All right. Thank y'all for giving me a little bit more time there. Wanted to make sure we got through some of that stuff as well. And next week we'll try to continue on with that. All right. I can't. All right. So let us pray. Dear Yah, we just thank you for everything you've done. We ask you to continue to watch over us and keep us in the things you so desire for us to do. We thank you for, just sharing the knowledge with each and every one of us. And as we share with one another too, as we grow as a people, as we become your set apart and holy people, the people that you so desire from the very beginning, that loves you, that are devoted to you and your ways, to your commandments, to your feast days, to all the things that you want us to do because you are our God, our Elohim, our El, our everything, creator of heaven and earth. And how should we not bow down to a person that loves us, that even chastises our wrong and not eliminate us, to now call us back to being your own? We ask you to bless those of our people throughout the four corners that don't know you, those that are wrestling with some kind of identity issue, those that, even have hate for their own people. We ask you to bless them too. Help them to understand, how much you love us and how much we should love one another and continue to seek what's true until the day of your son's return. We thank you for your son who atoned for our sins. We thank you for forgiving us for our own sins, the ones that we did knowingly, where other people know, and the secret sins that we have in our heart. We ask you to help us to be saved from them, deliver us from those things so we can become your true people, your true children that you so admire and adore. And we love you and we praise you and ask you to be with us until we meet again. In Yahushua HaMashiach's name we do pray. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah.